Zoning Districts, establishing minimum residential density standards. We'll begin the public hearing with a staff report, followed by public comment, and then the matter will be discussed and acted upon by the council. Is there anyone present who wishes to challenge the authority of the council to hear this matter? Do any of the council members wish to abstain from participating in this hearing or declare a potential conflict of interest? In this hearing, the recommendation of the council will be based upon specific criteria. All testimony and evidence must be directed towards those criteria. The criteria which apply in this case are noted in the staff report. It's important to remember if you fail to raise an issue with enough detail to afford the council and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue, you will not be able to appeal to the City Council you will not be able to appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. I have the wrong thing I'm reading here. The hearing will now proceed with a report from staff.
Thank you, Mayor. Members of the council, Bradley Clark, Community Development. I also want to recognize Jason Mackey, who is here with us tonight. He's one of our associate planners in community development, and you have seen him before in some of your workshops. He put a lot of time and energy as well into the background on this ordinance, starting with Housing Advisory Committee as well as presenting to the Urban Planning Commission. So just a couple of slides with some summary background, most of which the council probably knows. This really kicked off in earnest spring of 2019 when the Housing Advisory Committee discussed minimum densities as a potential to address the city's housing challenges. In fall of 2019, the Housing Advisory Committee added an Action 2.4, develop minimum density zones in parallel with density transfers as a work plan. They had been at that point formulating a work plan, and this got added in there. Then in January 2020, during the strategic planning session, the City Council acknowledged that work plan, which included Action 2.4. October of 2020, HAC included minimum density on its list of top 10 priorities for the 2021 strategic plan when they were recommending to council their priorities. March of 2021, HAC passed a motion to recommend to council adoption of minimum density standards, and that's when they specifically recommended the 60% figure, which you have been discussing in your prior workshops. May of last year, May 10th, there was a City Council workshop to review the HAC motion in detail. At that point, Council did request some additional research to consider minimum densities above 60%. Also, there was concern about how would exceptions work in the ordinance, and then you asked for examples of built projects that could achieve or had achieved already 60% of the minimum density. The August 30th workshop followed up with a lot of that material, and you discussed that research and then gave direction to proceed with an actual development code amendment that would incorporate the language. And that was put into a application, number 405-12822, and the Urban Area Planning Commission, that's when they held their public hearing. And they recommended approval of the ordinance to you. There was a couple of small edits that they recommended. Otherwise, the language as it came out of City Council is largely what the Housing Advisory Committee, what the Planning Commission passed on to you. So that's kind of the overall background. In terms of general purpose and goals, what exactly is this ordinance calling for? In terms of the goals that it's shooting for, it's aiming to accomplish the goals specific to the comprehensive plan, number 9.4 and number 9.8. 9.4 talks about the city wanting to have a variety of housing types, and policy 9.8 talks about the need for additional rental units as well as an increase in multifamily units. Another goal is to ensure that the urban service capacity is used to its greatest extent in areas with high levels of public service. So that's basically saying, wherever we have high density zones, wherever we have the ability to serve higher densities, such as larger sewer pipe sizes, such as sufficient water supply, not low pressure zones, where we have pretty good response times from the police, where we have pretty good response times from fire, which is all over the city, but in terms of these are even greater ability to respond. So we're really talking about zones that are scattered around the city, but have kind of being able to maximize those urban services. So we also wanted to achieve more efficient use of the city's high-density lands and meet housing production goals, and then to increase the diversity of housing types. That last one is somewhat assumed in that the requiring a higher density development is typically going to get you that middle housing type, like fourplexes and above, or your apartment type projects. These 3 bullets are taken from the housing needs analysis. That was developed last year. Council has seen that. The Planning Commission's also held a public hearing on this document. We felt that these are 3 kind of relevant points from the housing needs analysis. We're forecasted to grow at about 1% per year over the next 20 years, adding about 9,400 new residents in the urban growth boundary. Population growth will require, according to the housing needs analysis, 4,055 new traditional units and 114 group quarter dwellings. I did put in there, in parentheses, figures exclude the existing deficit. That is basically saying that 4,055 number doesn't take into account the deficit that the city is already experiencing. The Oregon Revised statutes for housing needs analysis actually don't allow you to do that, so that's why that's there. So you can, we've assumed probably at least another 1,000 on top of that 4,000 number. The last bullet, approximately 60% of the future housing need will consist of single-family detached housing. 18 will be a mix of townhomes and plexes, 13% apartments, 6% manufactured housing, and 3% in group quarters. So this ordinance tonight applies to the R3 zones and the R4 zones. The R5 is referenced there in the second bullet just because in the code the purpose statements are very similar, so they're put there. But the ordinance tonight just affects the R3 and the R4. I won't read all of that, but essentially it's saying these are our medium and high density zones that the city has. This is where they were intended from the beginning. A couple of decades ago when they were created, this is where the city intended to put higher density development. This table is taken from Schedule 12.4B in the Development Code, and we put it in here mainly just so you can see what the code currently has. If you look here on the right side, the minimum density column, and you come down to the moderate and high density zones, you can see that the R3 currently doesn't have any minimum density, and the R4 doesn't have any minimum density. There are minimum densities shown in the -M zone, which is currently in the code. That -M stands for minimum density, but none of these zones, R3-M, R4-M, R5-M, exist. The code allowed for them many years ago, but no property owner, neither the city nor a property owner, have actually zoned property with an M on it, meaning there is no minimum density districts today, even though the code does allow it. So the next couple of slides are just going to show what exactly is in the code amendment. It's going to change one existing section in Article 12, 12.145. It's going to add a new section, 12.146, and then it amends Schedule 12.4B. And these are on page 12 of your packet. So the new residential development in the R3, which there's an R3-1 and an R3-2, and then in the R4, there's also an R4-1 and an R4-2, are required to achieve at least 60% of the maximum density in those zones. And we'll show you what those figures are here in just a second. So a site that is non-conforming in the minimum density can't go further out of conformance with that standard, but basically if you demonstrate that you're moving closer to getting to that minimum density figure, then that development proposal would continue on and go through the permitting process. In terms of how land divisions would work, so if you currently have a parcel of land in the city that's zoned R3 or R4, they are going to be required to demonstrate compliance with the minimum density requirements of the base zone at the time of the land division. This is basically achieved through a conceptual site plan showing footprints and other kinds of how you could theoretically achieve the minimum density. You have to come through with those building permits, but if you're dividing your land and you're creating new lots, you are still going to, under this code, be required to demonstrate that you can achieve that 60% figure. As I mentioned earlier, the current code has that M suffix in it today, but because the language doesn't match with what the council has asked for, nor what the Planning Commission is recommending, you'll see on page 13 of your packet that those existing language about minimum density would be stricken entirely, and then replaced with the new language. Section 12.145, this has to do with flood hazard areas, and this is one of the natural features that would be deducted in land area. This is an addition to the code that we already have in place. We already talk about when you're calculating density, you take out slopes, you take out wetlands, you take out various other features so that you don't have to factor those in. This is adding flood hazard areas into that. So here is the current standards for maximum density. So again, what this code's doing, it's saying you have to build at 60% of the maximum density. So this red box shows the figures that are going to be impacted by the ordinance. It doesn't affect these ones above, but the ordinance tonight does affect the R3 and the R4, and so that's saying you go from 17.4 dwelling units per acre up to 50. The 50, again, I shouldn't have actually put that red box around that one, I apologize. The R5 is not part of tonight's ordinance, but 17.4 going up to 34.8 are all the existing maximum densities. And so here's how those would change under the ordinance. You would have to come in at a minimum density of 10.4 dwelling units per acre in the R3, 12 dwelling units per acre in the R3-2, 20.8 dwelling units per acre in the R4-1 and R4-2. So those would be the specific numbers that community development would calculate at the time of application to come in with a new project. The proposed amendment does have an exemption in it, and that exemption is if you have a property that's 10,000 square feet or less that is in existence when this becomes in effect. It's 100% exempt from this ordinance. You don't have to do any kind of minimum density. So that's a flat-out exemption. There's also exceptions, and the main exception is basically in number 1 here, and this is at the staff level. So this exception doesn't require a variance. It doesn't require a public hearing to go for the exception. It can be done as it's written now at the staff level. And what that exception says is that if you have a building site that is 10,000 square feet or larger, and the applicant can demonstrate through a detailed site plan that that property has so many constraints on it that the share of that minimum density requirement can't be met, then the exception can be granted. So it's pretty straightforward on paper. It can get a little interesting, but what that constraint means, for example, if you had kind of a triangular shaped parcel and, you get up towards that triangle part of the parcel and you can't meet, your setbacks, you can't really put any parking in there, you can't really do much with it. You could, show, well, we can't, even though we have square footage in that triangle piece, we can't use it. We can't really put any buildings there. Maybe there's a large right-of-way dedication, for example, that you're on an area where the city anticipates new expansion of a road, and so that land is going to be taken away from you, and you're not going to be able to use it to build your project. Those are a couple of examples. They're really endless in terms of what could be exceptions. So it's pretty broadly written, and this is our interpretation of how council wanted us to proceed. Number two is just saying that the applicant has to demonstrate, that the maximum number of units are being provided while complying with all the development standards. So you still got to do your landscaping, you still got to do your parking, etc. And then it emphasizes that there's nothing that would keep you from filing for a variance if you can't meet that 60%. And finally, number three there, if a property is occupied by a single dwelling, as of the date of this ordinance, the dwelling can be enlarged, reconstructed, etc., without having to meet the, you can do whatever changes you would like to do with your existing house. This isn't saying you have to come in and build an ADU or add a duplex or anything like that. You still have all the same building rights, densities, etc., that you had prior to this ordinance being in effect. And the last few slides in the presentation are just going to kind of be a couple of examples. I won't spend too much time on them because you've actually seen these. It's just kind of showing two existing subdivisions in town side by side and sort of how those lay out with this if this new ordinance were in effect. Highland Meadows is on Highland, just on your way out towards Vine. On the right-hand side there used to be a church there a couple of years ago that was taken down. And then Evergreen Manor is on G Street, on the north side of G Street as you're heading out towards Lincoln. And these two are both built-out subdivisions today. They're both in the R31 zone, pretty similar sizes. The maximum densities are shown there, and what this is showing is that if that 60% maximum was required today, then Highland Meadows would have to have 18 dwelling units in it, and Evergreen Manor would have to have 19 dwelling units in it. They both have 11 lots, and Highland Meadows was built out as a single-family project. Evergreen Manor was built out as a duplex project. And really that's the difference. So Evergreen Manor would comply because they're exceeding 19, which is the 60%, and Highland Meadows would have not complied and would not have been permitted to continue on because they did not achieve the 60%. This slide is showing the distribution of our R31, R32, R41, R42 throughout the urban growth boundary. As I mentioned, all the way up from I-5, along the sort of the center in and around the central business district, and then south of the river, we have quite a bit of R3 land. RCC is that big R42 there, so that's in some ways irrelevant to this because that property's so built out and has an existing committed land use. During the workshop, Councilor DeLagrange asked some questions about these next two slides, in particular. How are the existing lots when we're talking about vacant lots, and what's the opportunity to actually maximize this code? How were those calculated? We did do some research. We did talk with the Josephine County Assessor's Office. We feel pretty comfortable with the numbers that are here. It's basically saying here on the far right, in these zones, the total number of lots today is 3,400, and the total acres is 1,128. And again, we're talking about just the 4 zones that are impacted. And if you look at of all of that land, which ones have vacant, which we consider $10,000 of value today or less, then there's 313 lots and 191 acres. And then if you look at 50,000 or less, which would be considered underdeveloped or underimproved, so those could have a manufactured home, they could have some other fairly decent structure on it, but maybe would be redeveloped. That's what that's showing. So this is just saying we have about 191 acres that are considered vacant and 237 acres that are considered underimproved.
Valerie has a question.
Yeah, I just had a question. I think it's the same question Rick had. Suddenly we jumped into dollars. Can you explain to me why suddenly we're talking about dollars? Because we've been talking about 10,000 square feet and acres, and now suddenly we're talking about dollars.
Sure. So the dollar is when you're estimating whether a property is vacant or not. And the county assessor doesn't have that specific category. So we had to figure out some way to say, okay, well, this piece of land, is very largely, is likely to develop with little to, expenses because it's mostly vacant. So the $10,000 value is trying to get at that, whether it's considered vacant or not.
Could you also clarify, and because we talked same thing, between anything less than 10,000 feet, 10,000 square feet. What is a possible square feet of an acre? I guess I should know that, but I don't.
43,560.
Is the number of feet in
Square
an
feet.
acre? Okay.
Brian?
Yeah, I just had a question about the numbers up there because you have the total lots in 10K and 50K and then the total lots total, and those numbers obviously don't add up to the total lots and total acres. So I'm just wondering what the total lots and total acres means in comparison to those values on the other columns.
Yeah, I probably would have made more sense to put these 2 columns, over at the left, just to kind of show you that these are the total number in per zone.
I see. Thank you.
Sorry, yeah, it might have made more sense to put them on the left and then.
Joel?
Good presentation, Brad. Thank you. On slide 5, I just had the housing needs analysis. We talked about 4,000 new traditional dwelling units. That would be single-family homes. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. What is a traditional? What is the definition of a traditional dwelling unit?
So most of that, you are correct, Counselor, would be a single-family detached dwelling. Okay. But it could also mean a townhouse where you have 3 or 4 single-family dwellings that are actually attached, kind of like your old brownstones or
sure.
kind of things.
Well, then you have 4,000 of these new detached units over the next 20 years, which is about 200 per year. If you factored in the housing units as actually being the mix that you have below in that slide, 18% will be townhouses, 13% will be apartments, 60% will be future housing needs. What would that number then be of just total dwelling units? Do you have any idea? Is my question clear?
I'm not following yet.
Okay, so we have 4,000, our population growth would require 4,000 new dwelling units that are detached, mainly single-family homes. But we're not going to build, they're not, the future housing needs are not going to be all single-family homes. They're going to be townhouses, apartments, and single-family homes. And so how many structures, that 4,000 new traditional dwelling units actually would be approximately, what, 3,000 probably? Total dwelling units over the next 20 years, because when you build an apartment complex, you put in 20 dwelling units in 1 acre.
Okay, I see where you're going, I apologize. So, and I misspoke, that 4,055 number would actually be any dwelling unit, which a dwelling unit has a sleeping, has a place to cook.
Sure.
And a place to go to the bathroom. So,
Sure.
I mean, those are basically what's required to be a dwelling unit. If you don't have all three, it's not considered a dwelling. So that 4,055 number would actually include apartments. It
Okay.
would include,
Okay.
I apologize.
And so then the dwelling units then the total number of buildings then would be reduced over time, or would be reduced from that figure, because that counts an apartment as a 20-fold increase, or 20 dwelling units. So
Yes.
So the building permit, so you'd have a lot fewer building permits than 4,055.
Correct.
Okay, and then just for my information, and you may not have this, Brad, and I should have asked you ahead of time, so it's my fault if you don't know the answer. What in today's world, and in the last year, how many dwelling permits did we get?
In 2021, I think we issued in the ballpark of 170 to 180.
Okay, so 170, 180, and that includes then some of those apartments which count as 20 or more. So we probably are on track with the new ones, we're just not catching up, is what I hear you saying.
Right. I mean, the deficit is so great that it's,
Okay,
not
okay,
happening.
we're keeping, okay, I got you. Then the other question I had was in the R3 and R4 zones, the existing infrastructure, is it adequate in all those or not? Do we have some investment we need to make in our infrastructure to allow that 60% density in that?
Yeah, and Jason may want to chime in on this, but based on our master plans that we had approved in 2016, what those master plans said were we have adequate capacity at the treatment plants, that we have adequate ability through the plan to do stormwater control. We have adequate ability. It does not mean that on one particular piece of land that in order to connect to the infrastructure that you're not going to have to do some upgrade or some other.
So we can anticipate then with this zoning requirement some need upgrade to our infrastructure, which isn't bad, but that's going to be one of the intended consequences.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's a development by development kind of case.
Sure.
Where you look at that, but the way that we've structured with our system development charges and the permit can't proceed unless they're meeting those minimum thresholds.
Okay, be nice to identify those ahead of time for perhaps some capital investment. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any other burning questions before we continue? Aaron, you have something?
I was just going to add to that, just to clarify responsibility of infrastructure. Our system is set up much like most other municipal systems, to where development help pays for the infrastructure. So if you're running needing to run water and sewer to a new R4 zone, it would be the developer's responsibility to run that, and then if they need to, they can set up a reimbursement district, etc. And so wanted to just make that point.
Thank you, Aaron.
Val?
Yeah, I just want to follow up on that, because if I'm not mistaken, the purpose of the SDC is not actually paying for the infrastructure, it's paying for the increase in capacity. Am I correct? So isn't that the purpose of collecting SDCs, is that because you're increasing the capacity that will be used for our water treatment plant and those sorts of things, that is what an SDC fee does?
Yes and no. It does a lot of both. So there is a component of that which is attached to capacity at the wastewater treatment and the water treatment. There's a capacity, or a portion of that's for capacity in the collection system, but it is a portion of that. And a lot of it is actually reimbursing the system for the infrastructure that's already been built. So as an example, all of the currently connected users have paid for the upgrade at the wastewater treatment plant and built that extra capacity. So when you connect, you're paying a portion of that back to the other users.
And I guess it's something that I've always wondered was why part of that, since you're paying that SDC and it's so expensive for a developer to come in and put in all those costs of it, that it seems that they should get some sort of credit since they are adding capacity, which is what which they just paid the SDC fees for up front. So, that's, I guess that's the age-old question of, and knowing how expensive it is for a developer to go in and be able to put all those costs out up front. So that's always that iffy area that I've kind of felt like, well, they just paid this huge SDC fee for capacity building, and yet now you're asking them to go in and put in the pipes that are adding the capacity. So I kind of feel like sometimes they're getting that double whammy.
Related to that is you do get a credit if you're building on a parcel that already has a sewer service, a water service. So it's not like you don't get credit for this. If you have a house and it's already got a sewer line, a water line, that, to that, you are getting credit for that if you decide to demolish that structure and put in a new one.
All right, let's finish up with the presentation.
Close. 2 slides, I think, to go. This is similar to the prior slide. This is just stating, and we actually got this one correct, Councilor DeLaGrange. We put the total lots and acres on the right, on the left side. This is showing the number of lots that are greater than an acre, and then the percentage of lots that are greater than an acre, and then the number of lots less than 10,000 square feet in the percentages. So again, this is trying to paint a picture of what kind of opportunities there may be and moving ahead, to utilize those 4 zones. So, again, we're talking about 163 lots that are greater than an acre. And so when you're talking about 4plexes and above, you do start to really need some of those larger lots. So this is the Planning Commission recommendation. They met on February 23rd, and they did recommend approval as it's in your packet. And the revisions that they made were fairly minor. This is on page 13 of your packet. They wanted to replace the word stream banks with floodways, and then to remove the term flood hazard areas in that section. And that's really just to make it more accurate with our flood hazard code. So here's your call to action. Today, or as you determine, there is no 120-day limit on this action, so you don't have that state requirement on you for this. And there's your alternatives to either approve or amend it or deny it, or you could postpone it.
Thanks, Brad. Council, what questions do you have? Val?
I just have some questions. And I think you answered it after I wrote down the question. So basically what we're doing is we have always had the capacity to do this density because there was an M in there on some of these lots, and that's what they meant, is that there could, this is where there was a suggestion that was a density that was put there. But that's been there and nobody has utilized it, or have there been places that have utilized it? I guess maybe Evergreen Manor did utilize it and they chose to utilize it, or?
No one has utilized it.
Oh, no one has utilized it. Is there a reason why nobody has utilized it?
I do not know the answer to that. Most likely because the densities that they want to achieve as a developer can be achieved underneath the zone without putting the M on there. Okay. So, if you rezoned it, maybe the rezoning to the M honestly probably wouldn't ever happen from an applicant. That would have been something that the city would have chosen to do, to, rezone a property to put the minimum density on there. So yeah, the tool to do that was there. It's been about more than 10 years, but it just hasn't been rezoned.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Valerie, DJ joined us during the presentation and he wanted to respond to your question. Go ahead, DJ. Oh, hang on just a second, DJ. You're really quiet. Still too quiet. Yeah, hang on just a minute. We're hearing you like through a computer instead of through the overhead speakers. Try again.
Okay, how's this?
Much better. Go ahead.
Wonderful. I just wanted to add to your question, Val, just using Evergreen Manor as an example. I don't believe that the M designation was necessarily honored in that specific circumstance, but if you look at the plat, that was the most reasonable application of density for that property. So that actually kind of demonstrates really well the ability for, the approximate 2-acre threshold of getting into 60%. You can imagine if that property was smaller, even down to that 10,000 square foot threshold that we're talking about, it would get more and more and more difficult to reach that 60%. So the 1.5 to 2 acres is kind of the sweet spot for density, in my opinion. But the motivation behind that was to reach the highest density possible, regardless of what any requirement might have determined, if that makes sense. So I just wanted to add that to your question.
Okay, thank you, DJ. And so basically what I'm hearing from that too is it was actually an advantage to them as well to make it more dense, because obviously they're going to get more out of that piece of property, correct?
Yes. So there isn't a theoretical maximum density other than what cost would theoretically prohibit. Yeah. So what penciled there was the most density that could reasonably be reached.
Thank you, DJ.
Rick, did you have a question? No? Brian?
Yeah, thank you, Brad. Could you go to slide 19? So, looking at those totals at the bottom, I just wanted to make sure I understand this correctly. So, the way it's written right now, there is the exemption for lots less than 10,000 square feet. And I'm seeing that there's 2,618 of those out of the 3,400. So the way it's structured right now, 77% of the R3 and R4 lots would be exempted under this ordinance.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Vanessa?
I'm curious the basis for that 10,000 square foot exemption.
I think the main basis really comes down to if you do a schematic on a piece of land that is 10,000 or less, and you take out the land that's needed for your driveway, and then you take out the land that's needed for your building setbacks, which is 20 feet from the front, and typically 5 from the back or from the sides. And then you also factor in any easements, like power easements or irrigation easements that may impact the property. That 10,000 square feet gets to a building envelope that is so small that it would be very difficult to, really get the number of units as long as we have the parking requirements that we have. Now, if you go into big metros, when you have transit and you have zero parking, off-street parking requirements, it gets a little bit more feasible, to put like 2 or 3 units on there. But so it's really a function of the square footage and how the space that you need to get the amenities in order to accommodate the unit.
Rick?
So Brad, in that vein, for instance, if a lot was 10,000 square feet, or let's say 9,000 square feet, and theoretically, it would require 4 dwelling units because of the zoning, but it did not work and it did not involve floodplain or floodway, steep slope and so forth. Is there anything currently in the ordinance and the new ordinance that gives administrative authority to make that adjustment? So let's say that lot really realistically, for the reasons you just cited, was only 2 units work. Is there a way administratively for you to say, no, 3 or 4 units don't work, but 2 units do work, and we will give you that leniency?
So for lots greater than 10,000, are you talking about?
Well, I'm just talking about the situation on density. If they cannot, because it's less than 10,000 square feet, they cannot, you cited because of driveway and parking and landscaping and everything else, it just doesn't work. Is there, if it's not in the current ordinance, is there a way we can give you, staff, the authority, without going through a variance, to still get 2 units on that lot, where maybe 3 units were required, but we're achieving part of our density requirement, but waiving the 60% per se, but we're going to say, no, you can't put a single family dwelling, you still need to do 2, but we can do it in-house.
So yes, that is the wording that is in the exception here on the this slide 14. If I understood your question, Counselor, that is what that is allowing us to do administratively at staff level, is to, if you can prove that you don't have the dimensions or that there's other limitations or constraints on your property, if you can demonstrate that, then we do have, as part of number 1 there, the ability to waive that.
Okay.
The 60%.
Waive the 60%, but you're still not going to take it down to, unless extreme circumstances, it won't go to single family, it will still produce two dwelling units.
Yes. Yeah, waive was probably not the right word to use there.
Okay.
Because at that point, it really becomes math.
Right. Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
But just to make your point clear, Rick, that's only for 10,000 square feet and larger. So that does not address less than 10,000 square feet as it's currently written.
So I was after less than 10,000 square feet.
Okay, so with less than 10,000 square feet, this code doesn't apply at all.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
there is no requirement to do any minimum density on your lot.
So as a council, if we wanted to move in that direction to help the housing crisis, what would we need to do to give staff the authority to make that judgment or decision to allow less than the 60%, but still get decent development?
Well, if you wanted to go that route, I guess my recommendation would be to continue the hearing and ask staff to go back and do an analysis and, come back. So for example, if you wanted to change that number from 10,000 to 8,000 or 7,000, or if I heard you right, then we could to tell you what number of lots we're talking about.
And I'm not worried about that. I'm just saying if the property has the ability for 2 dwellings within reason, let's get 2 dwellings instead of just 1. But
if you're coming in on a 10,000 square foot lot. Okay.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that's in your, I think that's in your purview.
Any other questions right now? Joel?
So Brad, I'm going to try to go slow here to go fast. On slide 19, we have, and these are vacant lots, 1,128 acres, of which about, I just estimated 400 of those acres are in lots less than 10,000 square feet, so about 7,028 acres. That would, and that number, that 1,128, agree with slide 18, is being vacant. So if we have 700 vacant acres in R3 and R4, under this, and we build them to an average of 12 per acre, which is going to be greater than that because of Zone 4, 12 times 700 is 8,400 units, and we only need 4,055 over the next 20 years, so we would have double capacity on the vacant lots. Does that make sense to you? So it looks like a 60% would solve the need for an increase over the next 20 years. And I went too fast, I apologize.
Yeah, I think I lost you at the, you were referring back to this prior slide, I believe.
Well, if you can convert acres into dwellings, as you define, not a traditional dwelling, but a dwelling where people can live, by the minimum density requirement on that acre, which is about 12 on R3, and I can't remember what it was on the, I think it was 20 on R4, at 60%. So if you took your total acres that are available in R3 and R4, minus the small lots that are exempt, which is about 700 acres, you multiply that by your minimum requirement of 12
Right.
per acre, you would have 8,400 dwellings, capacity to build 8,400 dwellings. And our housing needs analysis talks about 4,055 would be needed over the next 20 years. So it looks like this, what we've put together here, would cover our growth needs for the next 20 years.
Well, you're making an assumption of gross net, a gross density as compared to a net density.
Okay.
So the gross density is in effect pointless.
Okay.
Because there's
so
no such
net
thing.
density would be, under this assumption, we would have 50%, we could have 50% net versus gross and still be okay.
That's, yeah, if you actually saw this fully built out on all these, but I think as Councilor DeLaGrange pointed out, we have a lot of parcels on here that, a lot of these acres have to be taken out of the calculation. So we're really talking about less.
So we could take out half of them and still be okay.
Yeah, we typically use net as about 35% of a lot is got to be taken out for right-of-way, for easements, for other things. So that gets you to the net, but even then, on the total acres, you need to also reduce because of so many of them are at 10,000 or less.
Sure, I hear you. Okay, thank you.
Other questions at the moment? Vanessa?
Yeah, to address Councilor Riker's concern, is it possible on slide 14, section 1, to copy that and create a new section for 10,000 square feet or smaller with a tiered approach at the staff level where staff can have the discretion to say, this isn't able to meet 60%, let's visit 55% and down in 5% increments? Is something like that possible?
Sure, yeah, it's possible. As I mentioned, I think I'd feel more comfortable to be able, to be coming back and do a little bit of research on that. But in terms of what legally you can do, I mean, unless counselors seem something different, you could do that.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone who wanted to speak in favor of this? Is there anyone who wanted to speak in opposition? Or Doug, come on up.
Doug Walker, Chair of the Housing Advisory Committee and resident of Grants Pass. So I wanted to talk about the 10,000 square foot exemption you all are considering for this 60% minimum density. I would recommend you don't have an exemption of any size. There is a way administratively to give exemptions for people that can't find this way of getting built, as Rick is nodding his head. And to talk about a 10,000 square foot lot, that's quarter acre. I, at 29 years old, 25 years ago, built a fourplex, 2 stories with garages, 950 square foot apartments on J Street, and that was on just a hair under a quarter acre 25 years ago. And I was a very unsophisticated, immature builder, and I was able to get it done without a problem. So the idea that 9,500 square foot lot couldn't take 4 units is silly. Developers are smart, they can get it figured out. They'll understand how to do it. So I would highly recommend you don't have exemptions in this for 10,000 square feet or less. It seems to defeat the purpose of the whole minimum density standards, mainly based on the percentage of lots that'll be exempted.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Judy, come on up, state your name. I think make sure the microphone's on at the base.
Here?
Yep, that's
Okay.
better.
Is it on now?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, Judy Aarons, resident of Joseph County. Very articulate presentation, everything, and kind of overwhelming to me because of all the stats and everything, but it was done very well. I guess the bottom line with me, where I'm coming from under our Constitution, is that people love to own property. You know, they love the idea of having property and doing what they want. And it seems like in our day and age now, we're getting more restrictions, more restrictions, more restrictions, more restrictions, more restrictions. Our founding fathers didn't want it that way. They want us to take our property, and unless we're doing a pig pen next to something or something that's just really overwhelming, I hate to see us lose our property rights. I guess as I'm sitting out here listening to the presentation, and we're talking about density, and in order to have this, you have to, if I understand it correctly, because this is all very over my head, I'm just from a simplified me, is that you're putting the requirement of density, and if you have this, you're going to have so many people or so many stuff in there on that little 1,000 or 10,000 square feet or whatever. So I guess I'm just saddened that we've gotten to this point in the 2022 that we're doing this. I don't know if you folks are going to be thinking about it or you had, Councilor King, you had some great questions. I love your questions. You're very articulate. And you are too, Riker. You're very articulate in what you're asking. So when you're thinking of that, we have an older generation that had their dream fulfilled. I'm looking at the next generation. Are they going to get their dream? Are they going to get the backyard with the swing set and the kids in the backyard? Or are they going to be living, as they call them now, in this new age of stack and pack? I'm really getting a little concerned about stack and pack. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wanted to speak on this? All right, at this time, I will close the public hearing. Staff, did you have any follow-up comments? Thank you. We'll turn it over to the council for your consideration. And DJ, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to chime in on the conversation about the 10,000 square foot threshold. We need to be very wary about clear and objective standards for land use. The development community needs to understand the rules and regulations by which they need to comply. And we need to be wary of allowing staff to have discretion on land use, which, from what I heard, the conversation notioned to exercising percent reductions until staff feels like minimum density is achieved. That's a policy decision-making issue. If we really want to look into this and iron it out, I think that would be appropriate if we are going to eliminate the 10,000 square foot threshold, because, as I mentioned, we need clear and objective standards for the development community to understand. Furthermore, I think that we need to utilize all available land out there. We are short on all kinds of housing, not just affordable housing, not just dense housing, but all housing. And therefore, if we do eliminate this threshold of 10,000 square feet, it's fair to presume that we are going to stymie the full utilization of the available land out there, given that the number one hurdle that we have in this community is the available buildable lands inventory. So I would exercise great caution in both not having clear objective standards allowing staff discretion on land use, but also consider full utilization of available buildable lands inventory.
Thank you. Rick, then Val.
So DJ, in response to that a little bit, I guess I would welcome the opportunity for staff to return at a future meeting and present different concepts of how we could address the less than 10,000 square feet lots, especially when you're looking at some of the percentages up there, up to 70% or even more are less than 10,000 square feet. And I hate to miss that opportunity. And the thing I see happening if we leave the ordinance as it's being proposed tonight, we, the City Council, will see many applications coming before us for an exemption to the rule because the people feel they cannot really make it work. Whereas if staff has the opportunity to come back and present us some administrative abilities to vary, I think would be an advantage. Thank you.
Valerie, then Brian.
Well, I'm going to say, on one hand, thank you, Judy. I think what you had to say is very true. I hesitate to step out too far into the development world and telling people what they need to do with their properties. I think that's something that is clear in our society that's not really looked kindly on. I do believe in, what has been presented. I do think having clear and objectable is in land use planning is very, very important because we've run into those houses before. People out there with land need to know what they need to do. I think you're better off to incentivize, and in some ways it should be an incentivization if people can get more on their property, and there is a financial benefit to them if that's what they choose to do. So I think you let the market drive it. I don't think we as a council should be putting the rules in place and telling them what they can do and can't do with their land. And I have very strong opinions about that. So I'm willing to step to the 60%. I'm willing to step with what we have here in front of us, but I am not really interested in going further at this point until we start to see more development happen. And I don't think that by making more constricting and making more regulations, they've proven that more regulations, the less building happens. And that is, I think, what most of our builders are up against, is making more and more regulations decentivizes them as opposed to letting them and incentivizing them to do otherwise.
Right.
So we are the regulatory body for the City of Grants Pass. It is our responsibility to make sure that the medium and high density zones are built out appropriately. If we do not do that, the city is less effective. The city is less resilient. The city is going to have problems down the road. R3 and R4 was designated a long time ago with future planning in mind that there's going to be more people. The city is going to continue growing even past 20 years. The housing needs analysis shows the next 20 years, but it's not like, oh, then we're done, mission accomplished. The city's going to be around a lot longer than 20 years, and I don't know that we're going to be getting any more R3 or R4 land. So we need to be very considerate about how we are developing that land. And when 77% of that is going to be exempted, it just leaves a huge opportunity on the table, an opportunity wasted for us to have proper infill in the city and to have our utilities and our infrastructure optimized in the city. So with regards to the exemptions that are listed for properties greater than 10,000 square feet, those have been presented to us before, and the reason they're in here is because we generally all agreed that those were good, because it's in what we are looking at tonight. So, there's an easy way to modify this, and it's just to take out, on slide 14, where it has those exemptions listed. If you, on number one, if you just take out the first half of the sentence, for development on a building site that's 10,000 square feet or larger. If you just take that out, you know, the current exemption structure just applies to all R3 and R4 land. So we don't necessarily need to complicate things by making staff go back and do a bunch more analysis. It would just take the current exemption structure and apply it to all of the R3 and R4 land. So that would be a simple way to move forward. But I really think it's important that we don't miss an opportunity with our R3 and R4 zones.
Valerie?
I have a clarification. So the land that is currently in our UGB, and there are some acres, was this included with them being R3-4? I mean, because we haven't really rezoned much of our UGB yet, have we?
I'm going to ask Jason he did some of the analysis work on that.
It would not include any land that's currently rural zoned, so nothing in the urban growth boundary rezoning project. It does include some land in the UGB that was part of the zoning transition overlay.
Would that be Allen Creek? I'm just like thinking of Allen Creek.
It wouldn't include Allen Creek because it hasn't transitioned into city zoning.
And how many acres are there currently in the UGB that have not been rezoned right now?
It's approximately 800 to 900.
And as that comes into the city zoning, at that point, it may also increase. I would expect, and I fully expect, Allen Creek to have R3 zoning as well as other areas that are currently not in the urban growth boundary. Am I correct?
There are lots within the Allen Creek area that are proposed to be R3 and R4. I think everything in the urban growth boundary rezoning project is intended to be a 2 designation. So R3-2 or R4-2 or potentially R5.
Vanessa?
So when we often talk about the housing needs analysis, we continue to use the 20-year time frame. It's no longer 20 years, it's now 18 years. So time is ticking, and it's ticking really quickly. With the way that the exemption is laid out today, this would only help build an additional 786 units. We know that we're over 4,000 behind, not even including the deficit that we're currently facing. I do support Councilor DeLagrange's recommendation to amend that first section of 12.146 and just have it for all lots and not overly complicate the square footage consideration. Losing 77% of the precious and finite high-density land that we have would be a serious miscalculation of council considering the housing crisis that we're facing.
Rob?
Yeah, when we look at how essentially everything that comes before council in one way or another dovetails with each other, you know, many of us, you know, feel that we need to support tourism, very important for Grants Pass economy. I think we all feel that way. We probably all feel that we need more manufacturing around here, try to attract large employers and so forth. And we've all heard all the time that part of the reason that we don't attract other employers for more traded sector jobs or products is because we don't have enough workforce housing. So it's, you know, to isolate one of these factors, I think is a mistake. So we need to look at, I believe, whether if we're going to support tourism, we need to have housing for service industry employees. And we need to have housing for, you know, workforce employees for living wage jobs. And that's where our deficit is, and that's where our deficit is going to continue to grow. I know that, you know, of the, I would say 3/4 of the people that have ever worked for me in the last 20 years, and that I don't, just pick a figure, that might be 100 people or 200 people. lately, in the last few years, anytime a house gets sold out from under them, or anytime they have to move for any reason, it's really, really tight situation. And these are exactly the levels of jobs that we are sometimes most concerned with, you know, $15, $20, $25 an hour jobs. Those are the places right now where those are the people that really can't find places to live. So we have an opportunity to try to essentially dovetail all these issues and remedy all of them, or at least move us forward in a direction that will encompass all of them. And we need to, I don't think that if we drop the ball here and don't really address that issue, I completely agree and understand, and I really feel Judy's statement tonight was, I think, in some ways really beautiful and really powerful, really spot on the one hand. On the other hand, we're all really concerned with housing for employees and future growth of service industries and future growth of manufacturing and so forth. So I think that I like and I support on first look or face value Brian's excluding that first statement of 10,000 square feet. In other words, there'd be some discretion for any lot. But I'm also concerned with leaving too much up to for staff interpretation on a case-by-case basis, because quite frankly, that opens the door to favoritism. It opens the door to a lot of situations that can be very ugly very quickly. So I like having things a little bit more specific, rather than having staff have open interpretation of what exceptions would be. But I also don't think that we should exclude 77% of our land, and we have to come up with a way to not exclude 77% of it for all the reasons that I just stated.
Joel?
So I also like that proposed change to the exemptions on item number 1. The other thing, the cost of housing just isn't affecting the lower income. I was at the Chamber of Commerce meeting last Monday, 2 Mondays ago. Asante, who's had a large turnover in staff, really has a hard time recruiting new doctors. And the reason they cited was affordable housing. And that was not the apartment type housing, obviously. And we're focused on the multi-dwelling, which is not bad. That's a good thing. I support that 60% that we're looking at. And the other areas that are zoned differently, that have the single-family homes, and then the areas in the county, you know, that's a need also. We're just not addressing that at this point in time. And I think we all care for the future generations. And Judy, I really like what you said. But here we got some zoning requirements that have been in place. We have the strictest land use laws in the nation in terms of what you can do in the county. And that amount of land in the city, as every city grows, the buildings go higher. And there's a reason for that, because the land is much more expensive and development is much more expensive. So, you know, at the extreme, if you go to New York City, the new affordable housing is, or even expensive housing, the condos, they're 100 stories high or 50 stories high. So we're a growing city. We don't have that yet. We will get it one way or the other. So I support what we're doing here, and I think it's a beneficial thing.
Rick? Rick?
I'd like to make a motion. I move to adopt the Development Code text amendment for Article 12 zoning districts with an amendment under Section 12.146 to delete the first part of that sentence, which is the development and building site that is 10,000 square feet or larger, as Councilor De La Grange said, eliminate that and just include the rest of it. And which would establish new minimum residential density standards and have it read by title only, first reading.
Is there a second? Kurt, thank you. Any discussion on that motion? Valerie?
Yeah, I have a couple things to say. Number one, I hesitate to do that without going out to the public and letting them know that is a decision that this council is making, because I do think there are a lot of people, builders included, and developers who need to be in on that conversation before we change that, because that's a pretty major change. So I hesitate without going out and getting more information before I just make that decision. I will also say, we talk about affordable housing, and, Joel brought up Asante, wanting to, and Rob brought up the need for the middle housing. Well, we are not addressing that at all. And everything that we have done with this council, and Brian, you are setting it at 100% of the AMI, which means we are not hitting workforce housing. We are not incentivizing it. We are doing nothing for workforce housing. What we're doing is we're basically going down to the 60 to 80% of our AMI, which is below the workforce level. So I hesitate to step out and do that and make that ruling without going out to the community and getting more information. So without more information, I do believe in the, and I believe in what they've done. I believe this is the first step to move forward. But I think that we hesitate sometimes to bring in the building and the community behind us before we make these things. And so I will not be voting for this motion.
Councilor Lovelace, we've been discussing density for probably a couple of years now, and we're just moving forward with it. And I feel the opportunity has been there for developers to express some of their concerns and be aware of what we're doing tonight. And I guess I'm of the preference that we have the best density we can get, and I think 60% is reasonable even on small lots. Thank you.
DJ, then Kurt.
Yeah, I'm gonna wholly agree with Valerie here. This started as a soft sell. Staff even said that eliminating this might take a little bit of work, because I don't think that the numbers we are seeing are accurate enough for me to be comfortable with such a staunch restriction. So I will also be voting no.
Kurt?
Well, as the presentation showed, this has come before us. This is the 9th time now. I'd say it's about time we make a decision, so let's vote.
Any other discussion? Rob?
DJ, what numbers were you saying may not be accurate? I'm not clear on what you're trying to say.
Go ahead, DJ.
I'm not sure I agree with 77% being knocked off the top of it by eliminating this threshold, as I understand it.
Rick?
By the discussion the council has been having tonight, it's also the realization this will not be passing tonight per se, and during the time period when it comes back to the council in the future, that additional information could be obtained or presented to councilors that have concerns about that this is not in the best public interest. So I am still comfortable with having the vote tonight. Thank you.
I think you meant passing unanimously, maybe? Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, let's see. Rick, you made the motion to adopt the Development Code text amendment with a change to section 12.146, number 1, eliminating the phrase "for development on a building site that is 10,000 square feet or larger." So how do you vote?
Yes.
Valerie?
No.
Kurt?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
Brian?
I would prefer it to be 70%, but I'm going to vote yes anyway.
And DJ?
No.
All right. Motion passes 6-2.
An ordinance of the Council of the City of Grants Pass, amending Development Code Article 12, zoning districts, establishing minimum residential density standards.
Thank you, and since that was not a unanimous decision, we will continue with the second reading at a later date. Next up, we are going to consider a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract for the water restoration plant replacement heat exchanger. Hi, Jason.
Thank you, Mayor.
I think your projection is not on.
Yep. There we go. Still trying to get situated.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I have a brief presentation for you tonight on projects SE 6416 and SE 6405, and that is the water restoration plant digester rehab and the replacement heat exchanger that we have previously discussed. So the subject and summary is to consider a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement with Sladen Constructors to replace the failing digester heat exchanger, as well as perform maintenance on the water restoration plant digester. The relationship to your council goals is maintain and operate and expand our infrastructure, continue with the water restoration plant rehabilitation, which was a 1-star item. A little bit of background on December 20th, 2020, Council authorized the city manager to execute a task order with Carollo to perform engineering and construction services to replace the aging heat exchanger at the water restoration plant, and that was under project SE 6405. The existing heat exchanger is no longer able to maintain a adequate temperature for digestion in the digester. That's due to a number of factors, but the unit is well over 30 years old. It just does not transfer energy very well, and so that lower temperature can lead to digester upsets, which can lead to process upsets, which lead to odors, and all of those things are really bad down there. The project also, at that time, was awarded an Energy Trust grant of up to $130,040 for the conversion to 100% digester gas and the reduced reliance on natural gas. And in here, I just left one photo so that those of you that haven't been there, this is the actual heat exchanger, which is this silver pipe right here. It's just two pieces of pipe that run transverse to each other. Hot water runs one side, sludge runs the other, and we transfer the energy to that material. Hang on. There we go. Great. So during design activities, it was determined that the digester would need to be offline for a period of time that would be detrimental to the health of the anaerobic process. So what that meant was the bugs were going to die while we were working on the digester. So during those discussions, a cost analysis of combining this project with an actual cleaning and inspection of the interior of the digester was performed, and we came to you at that time and suggested that it would be beneficial to do a digester cleaning at the same time we were replacing the heat exchanger. At that time, we also discussed that it was important that the anaerobic digesters be drained and cleaned roughly every 5 to 10 years. We have not been able to do that since 2001. Eventually, we'll be coming before you to ask for construction of a second digester so that we can get onto a more routine cleaning cycle, but because we only have one anaerobic digester, we cannot take it offline to perform that regular cleaning. So continuing with the background, in May of 21, Council did approve Task Order 40, which created a set of specifications to clean, inspect, and maintain that anaerobic digester. The task order would dewater and dispose of the current digester contents, and then design, install, and operate temporary dewatering facilities, which would be used for plant solids while that digester is down and offline. And that is very important because the solids that would be treated prior to digestion are not pleasant. I know that we all think that the wastewater plant is stinky all the time. Digested solids are actually not very smelly, but the primary solids that we're going to have to treat during this period are, so odor control is really, really key to this part of the project. So at that time, we presented you with costs. The heat exchanger replacement, we were estimating at roughly $880,000. The digester cleaning at roughly $640,000. And we also talked about a flare replacement at close to $400,000. It should be noted the flare replacement is not being undertaken at this time. It is anticipated that it won't be needed very much at all once we convert to digester gas, and we'll take a look at rehabilitating it at a later date. So the project was put out to bid in September of 2021. We received one proposal for $2.7 or $2.47 million, which was well above the engineer's estimate of $1.43 million. So after that, we reached out to a bunch of prospective bidders and asked why they didn't propose. They provided some feedback on how we had put the project together and how it was all basically one lump project and didn't allow them to bid where they were strong. And so we reconfigured the project. We put the project back out to bid in March. At that, we received two proposals, not great, but still better than one. And with pricing for both the heat exchanger and cleaning, and one just for the heat exchanger work alone, excluding the cleaning. We did reconfigure the project though so that we could award either the cleaning, we could award the cleaning to one company and the heat exchanger to another. We also could award both to a single company and then they were to provide us with discounted pricing for that. So I do have the bid tab. It is in your packet. What I wanted to share is that the low bidder was Sladen Constructors. They were low for both portions, so not only for the heat exchanger, they were low on the heat exchanger and the only bidder for the digester cleaning. In addition, there was a $70,000 credit for awarding both components to them. The other thing I did want to note is that after we rescoped the project and rebid, the price was reduced just about $90,000 from the initial bid that we had received from the original bidder. And the heat exchanger portion of the project is slightly below the engineer's estimate. The dewatering, however, is still quite a bit higher. We just underestimated the scope and scale of that work. And in addition, it's very specialized work, and there's only about 2 companies in the region that do that, so the pricing was set a little bit higher. So the combined cost of the 2 projects is $2.381 million. The funds are available within the Wastewater Capital Project Fund. There is currently $1,050,000 in SE 405, 6405, and $815,000 within 6416. And while that is a little bit below what the total project cost, we have put in additional funds in the FY23 to carry this project through. This project won't be complete until late fiscal 23. And there are plenty of funds available within the Wastewater Capital Project Fund. We do have a tentative call to action today. We must approve the project at this time or reject the bids. The quotes are only good for 30 days, and in today's market, we're lucky we got 30 days on the quotes. It's really a competitive market out there, and with that, I open it up to questions.
Thanks, Jason. Council, are there any questions? Guess not.
Thank you very much.
You. Is there anyone from the public who wanted to speak on this issue? All right, with that, we'll turn it back over to council. DJ.
I'd like to move as proposed.
All right, second from Brian. Any discussion on that motion? All right. It's moving to authorize the contract as proposed. DJ, how do you vote?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Valerie?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Motion passes 8-0. All right, next up, we're going to talk about the parklets downtown.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, members of the public. I'm here today to introduce the topic of parklets for future council discussion on the potential of establishing some form of a parklet program. Relationship to council goals is it does maintain, operate, and expand our infrastructure to meet community needs and encourage economic opportunities. One of the action plans coming from strategic planning was for us to consider parklet program. Today's presentation is going to touch on a couple of items. One, just give you a general background on parklets and why we are where we are today. ODOT's right-of-way and parklets. Survey results, which is something council wanted to get some feedback from the community on. Different program options when it comes to parklets, and then costs associated with the parklets. So just general background, we have a cafe sidewalk permit, and we've had outdoor dining of some kind in the sidewalk areas. But when COVID hit, in response to the COVID pandemic, council recognized that there was restrictions specifically to certain businesses, one of those being residents, and the city council moved very quickly, I think was one of the first in the region in the state to establish parklets and a parklet program for restaurants to provide an opportunity to serve in a outside area so they can maintain some form of seating. The city contracted with the Copeland Sand and Gravel and Riverside Ready Mix to place the concrete barriers out there. We did so. We did purchase some plastic barricades and constructed some temporary ADA ramps on 6th Street for a couple businesses that needed that because it was a different configuration on the parklet, so we had to use two different systems. The parklets were removed in early of November 2020, coinciding with the winter season, and at the request of downtown restaurants and in response to the continued pandemic, council decided to redo the parklet program. And parklets were then again reinstalled in March, and then they were taken down around October. So one of the changes that we're looking at potentially moving forward when it comes to parklets is ODOT did provide a temporary ease in some of the restrictions when it comes to use of right-of-way. They normally don't allow parklets in vehicular right-of-way, and so going forward, businesses on 6th and 7th Street will likely not be able to participate in any type of parklet program that is owned and operated by state control. So we'd be looking at, if a parklet program was to go into existence, something that is on a city/county road right-of-ways. We did a survey. Council wanted to know what the survey results were. I know we sent out some information for you on the survey results, but we did a number of mailings to a large area, a little larger than the Central Business District area, to try to get input from that area on what they think the parklets, the advantage of the parklets and how they felt about them. We received a number of responses, 19 total out of the 503 mailings for the residential surveys. We also did not only residential, but we also did business survey. We sent out 419 mailers, and they did say that the second highest response rate did indicate a positive impact on the parklets. So a number of them did not utilize the parklets because the parklets were, from a business perspective, because the parklets were only for a few businesses that were in the downtown area. So the parklet programs, to focus on what we're talking about today, there are two types of parklets throughout the world, throughout the nation. There are public parklets and there are private parklets, and then there's public-private parklets. So a public parklet is one that the city would initiate, and it would be open public space. So it could be used for anybody. It's an area where you can play games, like chess, or just sit down and read a book. It's extra pedestrian-friendly areas to enjoy the outdoors in a business retail establishment area. There are private parklets also, which is what we implemented. That is where private business utilize public right-of-way to do business. And that's basically the type of parklet program that I think council wanted to focus on, so we'll be focusing on the future discussion on the slides here. We'll be talking about private parklets. So that's parklets that are developed so restaurants or businesses can utilize public right-of-way. So parklet infrastructure ownership. It takes some infrastructure to have a parklet. Of course, a parklet utilizes city right-of-way parking spaces. If it is privately owned, which the majority of parklets out there through our research show that the majority of parklets are privately owned, which means the parklets are put together and placed and removed by the private entity. If it is privately owned, a parklet, and there's two examples here. The upper picture you'll see is our actual parklet program with the concrete barricades that we used. The second picture below is just a picture of a temporary seasonal type of parklet that can be purchased and removed and placed seasonally. The parklets, if privately owned, the city would establish a fee for the use of the parking space. There would be a parklet review and permitting process and or custom designs and builds for customers' needs, or the city would establish some kind of safety standards and standards for the parklets. The cost of something along these lines are anywhere from $1,000 to $40,000 depending on the design and size and what the customer wants to do. If the parklets are, if it's a city-owned parklet program for private businesses, we would establish fees for the parklet infrastructure and for the use of the parking space. There'd be a parklet review and permitting process, just like there would be for privately owned parklets. We would have some form of a pre-approved uniform design, which we would put out on the streets and in the parking spots that were approved. The cost would be the same based on what the look and feel is of the parklets. We would need to identify a location for storage in the off-season of the parklets if we were to own these, and then also determine maintenance, placement, and removal within the program. So a parklet program, if we're going to move forward with one, there's some key criteria that we don't need to define today, but staff would come back if council wants to identify a parklet program and develop one. We need to determine what the ownership is, and that'd be one of the first things that we'd take a look at. Is it going to be a public ownership? Is it going to be a private ownership? Or is it going to be some kind of hybrid? And what's the ultimate use of the parklet? Is it for private business or is it a public space? Eligibility. Council would want to consider what zoning or street classification, say for instance, what street speed level, miles per hour would be allowable, what area, would it be just a central business district, or what that location would be. Also, you may want to consider location limitations, maximum number of sites per block or parking spaces removed. You may say something like, if we're going to have a parklet program, it'll be in the central business district area because there's no parking standards there. However, recognizing the impact of a parklet on other businesses that aren't associated with that service, you're taking away parking spots. So maybe there's an acceptable level of parking spots within the central business district, and that would be the approved number of parklets you'd have. Or maybe you're saying you want to disperse those and maybe it's 1 or 2 parklets per block that would be allowed. Is there a season, or are they more permanent in nature? What would that season look like? Applications, are they on a rolling basis where each year, come whatever date, you can apply and they're approved just like it's a brand new program? Or is there some kind of historical preference that allows businesses that already have parklets to have a preferential opportunity to get their spot again? And then design. Would we develop our own design standards? Would we leave it up to the private individuals to put something together? And that would need to be considered, along with potential maintenance if it is ultimately somehow owned by the public, and then any other fees associated with it depending on the program. That's the council's choice. So we mentioned $1,000 to $40,000 is just sort of a breakdown of how we came up with those costs. $1,000 is about what it would cost if we did concrete barriers again per site. To rent them, it's pretty inexpensive. Although I think the largest complaint that we saw and heard was the aesthetics of those things. So I don't know if that's truly an option if we move forward with a parklet program. Concrete barrier purchase would be about $5,000 per site. The reason why I put that in there is there was just talk about, well, can we get COPA to get a program to put art on those things? Well, they weren't ours, so we couldn't do it. But if we did, would that make a difference in the aesthetics if they were painted or some kind of artistic design? Or what a lot of communities are doing that actually have a parklet program is there are a number, and industry has grown in this area. There are a number of companies that actually have pre-designed, fabricated models, which is one of those pictures that I showed earlier, and they're easily removable. If it's seasonal, they look nice, and those are around $20,000 to $40,000 per site. And then I put publicly constructed permanent parklets in there because one thing that we didn't discuss was would you be interested in entertaining widening the sidewalk in certain areas of the block to have a permanent parklet? So I hope this gives you some general background to start your discussion on parklet program for the City of Grants Pass. And if you're interested in moving forward with something along those lines, the call to action is at your discretion. The alternatives is to provide direction to develop a parklet program as generally defined by council, and then we'd come back to you with more specifics on our program itself. Continue outdoor dining opportunities through our sidewalk cafe permit program. Request additional information via council meeting or memo. And your potential motion could be one of the above. And with that, Mayor, I turn it over to you.
Thanks, Aaron. Do you know how many parklets we've had over the past 2 years?
Each season, we had 2 to 3 on 6th Street. And then we had 1, 2, 3, so I'd say around 7 parklets.
Okay.
And then the hall, maybe 8.
Okay, that's about what I was thinking. Council, what questions do you have? Valerie?
I guess one of the questions I have, and it's hard to see in this picture, but if they were to be built differently than the concrete, would we be able to lessen the size with the concrete? Were they larger than most parklets because of the size of the concrete? Just out of curiosity.
Yes, if you go to more of a site-specific parklet, and I'm going to go back to this picture here, it really takes up less, let me get my laser pointer. It really does take up less space per restaurant than something along these lines. This does require a little more space to put out there. So it is space-friendly. These are space-friendly along with aesthetically pleasing.
Okay, and my next question is when we built them on 6th Street and we did the pedestrian on the outside and allowed them to do more of the, the restaurant right there on the sidewalk, and then the pedestrians went around, how much were the costs for that particular design?
There's a couple of reasons why that would be the non-preferred way. Some of that is ADA and the potential hazards associated with having that kind of detour for pedestrians. The parklet programs that we've looked at, unless there's some kind of situation or circumstance that doesn't allow it, has the parklets taking up parking spots and keeping the pedestrian access on the sidewalks.
Are there other questions? Joel?
Aaron, could you briefly describe for us the existing sidewalk cafe program?
Yeah, I'll let Brad do that. He knows I could, but I'll let Brad jump in, and his department is the one that handles that.
Yeah, so if you own a business and you have a public sidewalk adjacent to it, and it's wide enough that you can still permit a minimum of 4 feet of clearance, you have to have a minimum of 4 feet of clearance for ADA purposes. Some of our sidewalks do not allow for that, but if you on the wider ones, you can still have a table, you can have a chair, and still have 4 feet of clearance for ADA purposes. If you're a retail, a merchant, or a restaurant that has next to one of those sidewalks, you simply come in, apply for it, show a basic hand-drawn site plan. It shows how you're going to lay out your tables and your chairs. We do have a liability insurance that we require to be renewed every year, to be in place, basically to cover the city. And then, in terms of enforcement, it's really just kind of we monitor that through either public, or sometimes the officers will see an issue, but there's really limited cost to the fee.
Other questions? All right.
All right,
Thanks,
thank you.
Darren. Is there anyone from the public who wanted to speak on this issue? Yep, a whole bunch of you. All right, please come forward just one at a time and make sure the microphone's on and tell us your name. And just so you know, there is a 3-minute time limit when you're speaking, and the lights on the podium are not working tonight, so we have another one set up on this podium over here. When you get a yellow light, it means you have 30 seconds left, so don't panic, but get ready to wrap it up.
Well, hello, I'm Jay Staggett. I wasn't planning on talking about this, but a thought occurred. If you wanted to go with the city-owned option, that picture, that second picture on the bottom that was shown up on the slide, something like that looks like it could be constructed by the Grants Pass High School metal shop team. So if you wanted to save some money, might be worth reaching out to them, seeing if they wanted to collaborate with you guys and build something that they're proud of to show off in this community and expand that. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Just come up one after the other. I don't need to call yet.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you. My name is Terry Hopkins. I'm with the Oregon Restaurant and Lodging Association. I serve on the Tourism Advisory Committee, the Chamber's Business Retention and Expansion Committee, newly appointed Caveman Plaza Task Force that's being reassigned, and I'm also the owner of Steam Distillery here in Grants Pass. Really disappointed to see the survey results so minimum. Hopefully it's a result of some survey burnout during COVID. But in the folks that I talk to, whether it's on any of the committees I'm on, working with restaurateurs, or just dealing with the general public, I think that this matches a lot of what we've talked about in the city's master plan, in promoting tourism, in bringing a vibrancy downtown to our historic district and business district. And while I understand that there are going to be options that are more available, I'm thankful for council for taking quick action during COVID to help many of these businesses. And there definitely is a need for aesthetics, but as we are at a point with an 80-degree day tomorrow, I certainly would propose an opportunity for city and private businesses to collaborate, perhaps businesses participating in a more aesthetically pleasing look. I do hope that council finds a way to move forward that doesn't take us far beyond our summer season, and ask that you would consider parklets to start right now and become part of an evolving project that continues to enhance downtown and our local businesses. Thank you.
Is it on? Testing. You didn't turn it off, Terry. My name is Angela Padilla. I am owner of Cultured Palate, Cuban food, cocktails, and wine. My husband says he's the culture, but I'm the palate, because I'm the one who makes it taste good. Only Cuban restaurant between Portland and Sacramento. I have 3 minutes, I can say that. So anyway, my thoughts here, I just kind of wanted to support Terry and fellow restaurant owners in the sense of the parklets were awesome. They really got us through COVID. A lot of us, and unfortunately some have closed. It was really tight, but it allowed us to keep going during takeout, which was great, but wasn't always enough to get us through. And the public liked it. That's the other thing that I wanted to say. Everybody really, really liked it, okay? And on that note, all right, I do have to say this. I am on 6th Street, and I'm not sure what would happen and how you're going to vote, and if it's even going to be an option, because 6th is considered a highway. I would like to state that, unfortunately for me, the way the barrier was built, it cut across my property, and it gave me less space outside than if I didn't have the barriers. So that's something I'm asking. I know that the city is only involved so much because it is a state
thing, but please be aware of that. And, oh, what was the other thing? Just, that was it. So with your statement, Aaron, Mr. Kubik, you had stated that it's likely that ODOT will not want to support having it on 6th Street anyway. Yeah? Okay. So for me, that's kind of null and void. Just a little bit there. I just kind of wanted to put that out there for you to consider and to hear from someone who is on 6th Street. Regardless, I know that it was very beneficial to my fellow restaurant owners and that the public really liked it, and yes, the aesthetics. And I like the high school thing. That's really cool. So thank you so much.
Hey, Angela, quick question. If it were able to continue on 6th Street, would you support that?
As long as it doesn't cut across my property, yes, I would.
Okay, just wanted to be clear on your position there.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I would. Thank you.
Okay. Somebody else?
Judy Ahrens, resident of Joseph County. I've been here for 10 years, and I've always enjoyed going downtown on 6th Street and Friday nights when they have all the fun stuff. And it's really been a delight, this little small community coming from Southern California. You can see the contrast. So this is a cute little community. And I've noticed even before we got into this nasty COVID, there's just so much controversy. And if you have an opportunity in epic times, man, did they explode on what was going on and the whole thing behind. In fact, I made a lot of copies. I'll give you one in the future. It was just dynamic. It was just unbelievable. But aside from that, my concept of this, and Aaron, you did a great job, all this possibilities out there. 2 years ago, it was cute. Some restaurants could have their little tables out front, didn't take up from the sidewalk, and we had the, we had the places to drive up and park there and do our usual thing. I know one of my friends says with all the barricades and all that, it looked pretty kind of a little dumpy, going down on 6th Street because of the situation. But once again, what drove that, because I'm not familiar with this new word, parklets, I guess I can still find it in Webster's, right? Maybe. But anyway, the whole idea is something drove us to this. It was that COVID that drove us into a lot of things. And my comment on that, it drove us to be outside. Everybody was so hemmed in that it was such an opportunity wherever we could, where it was barricaded or not. People wanted to be outside. They wanted to defy government or national government, whatever. They wanted to be outside and see what the world looked like outside and hear the birds sing, do things that we forgot about. Because right now in this room, without mask, I feel like I'm back to my America that I remembered 2 years ago. And I don't want it to ever go away again. I hope we can continue to be this and not get overly panicked and enjoy life in spring outside. Thanks.
My name is Jill Deeney. I'm co-owner of the Bohemian on G Street. And I want to say first, thank you so much for the quick action starting back in 2019 and continuing through 2021. From all of our experience with the parklets, so many people came to us and said, please make sure they come back forever. So I know it's something that maybe won't get decided right now, but if there's a way to have the parklets come back before April is over, while the decision-making is going on for permanent, or whether it's public-owned or private-owned, those things sound a little bit like needs a lot of thought. As a business owner, we are more than willing to help pay the cost. 40,000 is a little up there, but we're more than willing to work with whoever we have to work with to keep it going. We've had so many people happy about it. I do know that businesses that aren't restaurants had some concerns initially, especially because of losing some of that parking. But overall, I've heard so many people say, we couldn't park directly in front of the place we wanted to go to, but it made us get out and walk around. There were things we never knew existed in Grants Pass. So it was a really positive experience in many, many ways. I want it to work for everybody, but I want to see it come back as soon as it can. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wanted to speak on this? No? Okay. We will close the public comment and turn it over to council. Brian.
So this whole presentation was very thorough, and it may have been more appropriate for a workshop because it seems like there's a lot still to work out with the permanent program. However, it's already April, and it's already nice outside, so it's already parklet season, if we're being perfectly honest. So I don't know how much we want to get into the details tonight, but I think if we drag it out, we might not have parklets this season at all. So one idea would be to basically just carbon copy what we did previously for this year, and then we have a little bit more time to work out the permanent program and what that looks like, because there's just a lot of variables we don't know about yet. So, yeah.
Rob.
So, when we talk about this year versus the permanent program, I think that, we all know that we're considering a reconfiguration on G Street, which would widen the sidewalks, et cetera, et cetera. So I would imagine that if we used common sense here tonight, we wouldn't be making any permanent long-term decisions, or especially on spending large amounts of money, when it's possible that within a year or so we may have much wider sidewalks on the main, on the affected area, which would preclude the need for parklets in the future. So if we're going to talk about parklets at all, I think we should be talking about this year only, because we could have a whole different and possibly better solution in the future. I guess like just about anyone who's looked at it, page 73 of the packet, which is just one of the results of, the surveys, were just pretty amazing at how, at best, lukewarm the survey results were. It's almost counterintuitive, but nonetheless, that was our survey results. And we can either say that the survey was invalid, or we can respect it and say, hey, overall, there was lukewarm reception for this. Now, obviously, the patrons or the business owners that were most affected are going to be all jazzed about it, but I don't know if we can believe our survey results, but they were lukewarm. As a result, I went around the last few days and I spoke with many of the G Street merchants, some of whom I would use their names tonight. Others, if I don't use their name and anyone privately wants to know later, I'll tell you who they were, but some of them I think would prefer if I didn't use their name while I'm on the dais. But I'd like to say that clearly, because last year I went around and talked to everybody as well, or most people I should say, and I would say that most of the business owners, if not all of the business owners last year, were extremely gracious and were willing to do anything they could to help the restaurant survive. And that was, I would say, virtually every single business owner felt that way. People who really didn't care one way or another about a restaurant, didn't care really about anything except that they want to help their neighbors survive from a business perspective. For instance, and this one name I will use, the herb shop, the corner of 4th and G. Last year, they absolutely were willing to give up their primary or their best parking space right in front of their business. They, a little bit like my business, has sometimes an older or elderly clientele, and close parking is really a plus. They completely lost that last year with the parklet. They were very definite that they do not want to lose that space this year for a parklet. Last year, absolutely. This year, definitely did not. Which brought me to thinking, and I discussed with some others, and there was a few other businesses also who absolutely did not want to lose parking on G Street. One of the restaurant owners I spoke with on G Street also acknowledged that the parking there is not very good. She actually agreed with the idea that a parklet would be reasonable, but it should require the consent of the abutting businesses for that reason. To quote someone tonight, we need to have this work for everybody. This isn't just for the restaurants. Okay, it needs to work for everyone. So having the consent of the abutting businesses, to me, would be an absolute prerequisite for me to vote yes on something like this. I don't necessarily want to monopolize this because I got a bunch of other places I can go or information that you might all find valuable. But I know that Katura from the Laughing Clam told me that last year in the parklet, she had 6 tables. The parklet was able to accommodate 6 tables. On her sidewalk, she can accommodate 4 tables. So there's only a loss of 2 tables. You had the end result of outdoor dining either way, and as she said, it's not really a deal breaker either way for her. She liked the parklets, but she also was absolutely one that felt that the abutting businesses should be willing to sign off and agree to it. So, for now, and then we had a few businesses who were absolutely lukewarm, like the survey results were, and then we had a few businesses that did bring up, what about the wider sidewalks from the G Street reconfiguration? It would be ridiculous for the city, and they actually mockingly said, well, it's just the kind of thing government would do, spend money this year and then tear it out and put something in new next year. And I couldn't disagree with that observation, that would be kind of foolish and sometimes typical of what government does. So if we're going to do parklets, I would say that they should be of the 1-year duration or the 1 season duration, temporary variety, and I think that they should have the abutting neighbors consent, only with the consent of abutting neighbors. I also feel that the businesses involved should have to bear the cost, and the cost may be as little as $1,000. I think that was a low-priced one that Aaron quoted, and it could be up to a few $1,000s, but I don't see why the general public should foot the bill for possibly 3 or 4 restaurants on G Street having parklets. So I think that, and actually Katura from Laughing Clam said she would be happy to pay the cost, as did the woman from the Bohemian tonight. She'd be happy to pay the cost. So I feel they should pay the cost, abutting neighbors, and it should be a 1-year or 1 season view of this.
Other comments? Valerie?
Yeah, I love the vibrancy that they bring to downtown. I really do. I think what most of us struggled with was the aesthetics with the big concrete. I mean, that was kind of an issue. And I think part of the issue with that, and I also talk with the herb shop quite a bit and understand that their business is built on people just stopping to pick up things in this day and age of ordering and picking up, and some elderly people needed. And I went around and looked at the area, and that one parking spot is the only parking spot that is available for that. So I do understand that. So 2 things. Number one, I agree that we are getting ready to do the task force, looking at the reconfiguration of G Street. That's a huge, urban renewal agency investment and something to talk about. We want to keep it short, concise, so we can do what we are going to do if we're going to do it. And so it would be silly to invest a lot of money and then renege on it. So that does make sense to do something temporarily. I agree with that. And I would have to agree that you do need to get the neighbors' approval. I think we all want to see, a vibrant Grants Pass, and I would love to see the parklets, but I do think that it needs to be a block-wise discussion and deciding where they're going to go, and also have them be willing to put forth money to make it happen as we move to make a permanent decision down the road.
DJ, then Rick.
Yeah, Rob, you bring up a good point. I'm going to use your words here and say that I'm pretty lukewarm on this issue. I'm not putting a definitive decision on the survey. I've heard many of the things that Valerie and Rob has mentioned. I am concerned about parking in the downtown corridor. We have the downtown parking task force that kind of substantiates that concern. I am not interested whatsoever in the public option, whereas the city would own, install, and take down. I think that if I was to become favorable to this, it would certainly be setting a standard setting a term, and the private industry be solely responsible for the infrastructure in front of their businesses and installation and removal of that infrastructure. So at this point, I'm pretty lukewarm. So if you want it, convince me, and if you don't want it, convince me otherwise. Thanks.
Rick?
I like the comments Councilor DeLaGrange made that it's getting late in the season. It's already April and starting to get warm. And if we're to do something, we probably should try and put something together tonight so things could go forward. So I would be in favor of the 1 year. I would be in favor of something that's on the temporary low-cost vein. I could be supportive of the hybrid concept or just the private restaurant engaging in it. But I'm also supportive of the neighbors' businesses also signing off on the request. So that would be the direction I would be in favor of. Thank you.
Further comment, Brian?
Yeah, I'm just maybe looking for a little bit more clarity around what permission from abutting businesses means, because, you know, down there you may have a restaurant where on one side maybe there's another restaurant and on the other side there's a non-restaurant. So does getting permission from the abutting businesses just mean the business on either immediate side of the business that wants the parklet? I guess that's a question for the people supporting that idea.
Rob?
That was my original thought, and that was my original interpretation of what the people on G Street told me. I think overall, and I don't think it would be too much of a problem, but I think I would like to add to that, that a majority of the people on G Street first are in favor, a majority, but I don't think that would be too much of a hurdle. But then I interpret that as, yes, the abutting businesses on either side have to sign off, because the bottom line is their parking is affected. So, but that to me, abutting means right next to, on either side.
Rick?
I also agree with Councilor Pell that just the abutting businesses. Thank you.
All right. Somebody want to turn that into a motion? Brian?
So I move to provide direction to the city manager to develop a temporary parklet program for this year with similar parameters as was done previously, and with the permission of abutting businesses to those that want parklets as a condition of approval.
Okay, Valerie had the second, but I wonder what you mean by similar parameters to what was done previously.
Well, just whatever we did last year and the year before, just continuing what we've already done.
Like in terms of the materials or?
Yeah, in terms of the low cost materials and just whatever structure and program was used in the past 2 years, just doing that for another year while we figure out the permanent program.
Okay, and I guess in your motion, who would be paying for the cost of the concrete barriers?
The cost would be paid by the private businesses.
Okay. Did you have a question, Aaron?
Well, I think you were getting there. I have a very clear understanding of what you want to do, and that's where we're going. I think this could be to where we have an approved program, a 1-year program. The concrete barricades are the things that are approved for the parklets. It would be the owner of the business, after they've got approval from the neighboring properties to sign off on it, and they could contract with the company to put the barricades in, and there would be a fee associated with the rental of the parking space. And so that would be The way I'm seeing that, that's sort of the way I'm putting it together, to where we could put a program together and have it for you by the next business meeting for your approval.
Does that meet your requirements?
Yes, that was my motion.
Nicely done, Aaron/Brian. Okay, and do you agree with that still, Valerie? Okay with the second. All right, questions or discussion on the motion? No. DJ, did you have your hand up? I don't think so. That was an old one. Okay, in that case, let's vote. Brian, you made the motion. I'm not restating all that. We're going to vote on this again at a subsequent meeting, but I think Aaron's gonna lay out the program. How do you vote?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Valerie?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
DJ?
Yes.
All right, motion passes 8-0, and we will see that again, how about at our next business meeting?
That'll be fine.
Shouldn't be too hard. Brian?
Mayor, I was going to ask if we could move public comment to the next item, just because I think there's a lot of people that want to speak, and they've been sitting here for over 2 hours already.
Yeah, a couple of them wanted to speak, I think, on the porta potty issue though too, so. Okay, anything further on parklets? No. Okay, moving on. Next up is porta potties in Riverside Park.
So, Council Mayor, I have a fairly short presentation, kind of giving you an overview of where we're at with it's pretty particular presentation to the 2 temporary porta potties that were installed, with a couple of slides that talk about some of the bigger issues at Riverside, but it is specific to Riverside Park, and the two toilets that were placed there. The relationship to your council goals is Action supports the council's goal of leadership by responding to emergent needs in the public parks. A little bit of background, August 16th last year, staff gave the council an overview of the challenges particularly of our parks crews with maintaining the current levels of service. August 18th, you gave us direction to locate 2 portable toilets in Riverside Park for a 60-day trial period to monitor that use and the impact. 2 days later, we contracted with Best Portable Toilets, and they placed 2 standard toilets with hand washing stations, one near the 7th Street overpass and one in the parking lot east of East Park Street. We did later move that one, which was close to Park Street, down to more of the center area of Riverside Park. One point that's not on this slide, but I put into your packets, we did change those out from standard toilets to ADA toilets a few weeks later. Since that time, August 20th, my staff have conducted daily monitoring Monday through Friday in 4 areas, looking at tents, overnight vehicles, campers, which is individuals that are outside tents or vehicles, and then the amount of garbage collected. And then on October 25th, we gave you a presentation kind of summarizing that first 60-day trial period, and there was some other comments and information that was shared there. We had Ken Garrison at that meeting, our park supervisor, who also gave some input. A few of the things that were shared at that meeting, we We had witnessed a reduction in the brick and mortar restroom maintenance. Now, as you know, Riverside Park actually has 2 brick and mortar restrooms in there. One of them has actually been closed for at least a couple of years. The other one has continued to be open. So we're really talking about the main one that's kind of down closer to the pavilion area. And there was a noticeable reduction, particularly that information coming from our contractor who does the janitorial work, and conversations with those staff, and the amount of time that they spend in there fixing and cleaning. There's also been a number of the number of fecal cleanup incidents. There has been a decrease over that period of time. Trash continues to be a pretty big deal for our staff in terms of the amount of time and energy that's spent there. In terms of the community response team workload, and again, this information is coming from October of last year, the chief had shared that at least from their side, the portable toilets in and of themselves really didn't make that much of a difference. I mean, their workload and how they respond, pretty much the same. Pre-porta potties, post-porta potties, kind of no difference there with the CRTs. This is just a table summarizing that period from December 23 to a few weeks ago. There were 3 weeks because of sickness and a few other things that we didn't collect data. Basically, you're seeing, just take your eye to the bottom here, the weekly averages, Monday through Friday, 23 vehicles overnight that you have by our staff witnessing sleeping in. Tents, an average, 17 tents. A little over one a person sleeping neither in a tent nor in a vehicle. And then the trash number there, we have, of course, our regular receptacles, permanent receptacles that are spread around Riverside Park. What this number is the garbage bags that are in addition to what is normally picked up at those other receptacles. So basically, around 11 or 12 on average additional large trash bags beyond the typical receptacles. On October 25th, council voted 5-2, 5 in favor, 2 opposed to extend the time period on those portable toilets for another 60 days. The ones that were voting in favor of that commented, there were several comments, but in summary, that the toilet should be understood as being temporary while a long-term solution is investigated, and that the toilets do meet a pressing need. And then that second trial period deadline did expire on December 26th, and there has been no formal action until we've met tonight. Just a couple of short observations during the first quarter of 2022. We have continued to see outdoor fecal cleanup incidents drop from that pre-portable toilet months. And then damages to those restrooms have also kind of stayed lower than we had, which is kind of a logical thing. We did have one small fire in one of the portable toilets that cost us about $1,800 that we had to pay to the contractor to repair that. So there's a little bit of an offset there. In terms of other expenses, we basically pay about $1,300 to $1,400 a month, and that's for the 2 ADA toilets plus the hand washing stations. So, and then as well as the cleanings. So that's actually the most expensive part of it is paying for the cleanings of those 2 units. So that if you add that up over the period that they've been out there, is about $11,600 for toilet rentals and repairs. We have been paying those out of the Parks Division Maintenance Fund, but we have been, like other city departments who have had specific kind of COVID related expenses, we have been setting up a code so that we can track what those are, so that we can potentially look and review those costs and see if they're reimbursable under ARPA. And as I mentioned, we did incur that one-time $1,800 expense for the damage. The revenue that we've been using for this is up to this point general fund. And like I mentioned, if the council decides to put some funding towards this out of ARPA, that could potentially be used. And then we do have some staff time involved. Most of this, of course, is the contractor, the best portable toilets. But we have some coordination, of course, that goes on, working with them if there's issues, making sure that we get them paid and all that. And then the contractor, as I mentioned, has seen maintenance time, just some reduction by Diversified Maintenance. That's the company that we use for maintenance and janitorial work on the main brick and mortar toilets. So this is your discretion tonight, and there's a few alternatives for you to consider.
Thank you, Brad. Council, do you have any questions? Rob?
So, Brad, you said that there was roughly a 60 to 70% reduction in maintenance and damage repair on the brick and mortar due to this program. So, do you have a dollar figure associated with that?
I don't have a dollar figure, unfortunately.
What might we normally spend on vandalism repair or whatever? Is there?
You know, it's a good question. It's a difficult one to pin down. You know, I mean, is it the fish that got flushed down the toilet that we had to go get a plumbing contractor to completely redo, or is it more just kind of a small broken piece on the toilet, or is it graffiti that we had to go in and paint over? Each one of those has a different cost associated with it. Not different amount of time spent, depending on what that is. So, unfortunately, I just don't have a good number for you.
Brian?
Thanks, Brad. I just had a question around the costs, specifically regarding the cleanings. Is it true that those costs are for twice daily cleanings?
Yes. That is true. I'm hesitating a little bit because I don't know over the last couple of months. I know that during that first 60-day period, that is the case, and I apologize, I didn't confirm if that's, I think it's continued to be the case.
Okay. I think my question revolves around if 2 times a day is still appropriate given where we're at right now, and if there might be some cost savings to going to once a day, or if that's appropriate. So we can discuss that later.
Valerie, then Rick.
Yeah, I just had a question. You had mentioned 2 restrooms that Riverside Park had that were permanent. Was one of them that you were talking to out by the softball fields? Is that the one that's closed? I was just trying to think. I know the one that we have that's currently open. Is that where the second was that we shut down?
It's actually more on the upper end of the park, kind of closer to Park Street, where the maintenance yard is.
Okay, so it's up by the maintenance yard as opposed to that? Yep. Okay, and that's what I was making sure. So the Riverside Park is a completely different animal than Baker Park. So they're not
correct.
Continued. This is just the Riverside Park in particular that we're talking about tonight.
Correct, yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Rick?
Brad, can you confirm my perception that the last time the council voted to extend the bathrooms, that we basically demonstrated support for the park staff because they were feeling really frazzled with all the issues that they're confronting at the park? Is that a true observation?
I think that's true.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? All right, that's it for questions. Is there anyone from the public who wanted to speak? Step on up, make sure that microphone is on, and tell us your name.
Am I speaking loud here? I am? Okay. Hey, my name is Tom McElhenney, and I live at Riverside Condos there next to the park. I have a second unit condo, and our back patio looks out over the porta potty. I have a spotting scope in my bedroom, and since the porta potties came in, I have been constantly watching this area. A few days ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, I called the police. I seen a black car there dealing drugs for 2 days. The people would come up and they would be passed a bundle of drugs out of the car, and they would immediately go into the porta potty for about 5 minutes and then come out. And I would see this repeated 10, 20, 30 times a day. I believe that porta potty is being used as a shooting gallery to inject illegal drugs, or legal drugs. This is Oregon. Okay, now, when I'm watching this, people coming to the porta potty, there is one man that comes in on a regular basis on a skateboard, and he is swinging nunchucks. When they arrested this man in the black car, I watched them take a 2-foot butterfly knife off of him. Another man comes in and he has got chains around him, looped down, and a holster, and I thought he was carrying a sword. But after a few days of watching him, I realized it's a 2-foot screwdriver he's carrying. My wife and I are afraid to walk through this park. We're having gunshots down there, and a lot of it is because this porta potty has been brought in and it is drawing these people. We are afraid to go out on our back patio where we used to go out and sit and drink a cup of coffee and look at the river, and now we have a porta potty and gangsters down there. I called the Parks Department and I talked to a lady and I said, if you would have taken that porta potty and instead of putting it in the windows of these 30 units here facing it, if they would have moved it 150 feet the other direction and moved it towards the other bridge just a little bit, still be in the same parking lot, we wouldn't have to sit there and look at this 24 hours a day. The lady said she would email her boss. That was about a month or 2 months ago, and I've heard nothing, and it apparently did not get moved. So it's a bad situation there. I left it on.
Okay, is there anyone else who wanted to speak on this?
Judy Ahrens, resident of Joseph County. You know, sometimes, I remember this guy, this writer, and he said sometimes we start solving problems in the middle of the stream, and I always remember that. I read this article 20 years ago. Instead of solving the problem here, we start in the middle, and we never get the problem solved. And I'm looking at this situation right now, is that, to me it's obvious. It's probably not obvious to you, maybe, obviously. Using the word double here. But it's obvious that with the porta potties, we're encouraging this. Just that last gentleman, we are encouraging this. If you put probably cat food out, you might get a lot of cats out, and you don't want any cats, but you keep putting food out in front of your door or something, and you're acquiring all the cats for whatever you're acquiring that you don't want to acquire. So I think we have to look at what is your objective? What is your objective here tonight? To restore the family community park that was nice 2 years ago. If that's your objective, get the community involved, and with the police, with Chief Warren here, he's done a great job on what he's done recently with some of the people sleeping here and there and getting them off of Fruitdale Street. Because what I do, and you should do this too, here's an idea. Go out there and interview those people. Find out where they're from. Why don't they have a job? We have signs all over the place say job wanted, job wanted, job wanted. $15 an hour to go to McDonald's. I would encourage you to go out, because I've interviewed them. My friend told me, you better stay away, you're going to hurt Judy. But no, I go out and interview them. Where are you from? Oh, I'm from Medford. How'd you get here? Oh, my boyfriend dropped me off. You're in front of the post office and you're pregnant. You said you were pregnant. Got the big sign, it helps. But you got here at 2 o'clock in the morning? Oh, yeah. And so people are telling me people are coming into our community. Let's see where they're from. A lot of this problems is because they're from out of the community and they're in our community and they're taking over our beautiful parks like that gentleman said. Let's go, instead of start in the middle of the problem to how we can have more porta potties and all this stuff. Let's start at the beginning where we don't want any porta potties. I feel sorry for homeless people too, but when I see them with good shoes and see this, that, and they got their cell phones, I'm starting not to feel sorry for them. They're going to the banks and they're getting money out and they got their cell phones, nice ones, better ones than I have. So we have to find out, do you really want to get rid of these people? Do you really, really in your heart want to restore the community how it was 2 years ago? That's where you start. You start at the beginning of the river before you get in the middle and say, now we're just going to solve this temporary problem or what's there. We don't want porta potties. We don't want to feel comfortable. Like your kids, for instance. You don't want your kids to feel comfortable till they're 35, living at home and still giving them the car and they keep smashing it, do all these things. You want to be good parents, train them to be responsible, get them out of the house, make sure they get good grief and they're out on their own like my son is, doing great out there in the big world. So I think we need to find out, what do you really want? Do you want these people to continue to come back, or do you want to really solve the basic problem? Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wanted to speak to this?
Good evening, councilors. I'm the chairman of the River Park Terrace Homeowners Association. And there's 30 units down there. And Tom has already told you all the problems that's happened down there. I realize that you need
Mayor, we need his name.
Pardon me?
Oh, your name, please.
Norman Overbay. I'm sorry, I didn't say that. I understand why those porta potties are there. We don't want them doing things in the bushes. We don't want people doing all that all over the place. So you need to help them out. And
Speak into the microphone more, please.
And the problem we have is we have that porta potty sitting right there in front of 30 units. And a lot of those units, that's their living room. So when they sit there in the evening, that's what they're looking at instead of the beautiful river and the Riverside Park. Most of the people that use that are over on 6th Street, south of Caveman Bridge. As you know, they're tented. And I believe that porta potty should be moved over to that area. That's where it should be. So when you make your motion, make sure it goes that way. We would appreciate that. I think that's it. Thank you.
My name is Vicki Miller, and I am also a resident of River Park
Can you pull the
Terrace.
mic down just a little, Vicki?
Pardon, down?
Yep, there you go.
You got my name?
Yep.
Okay. I am also a resident of River Park Terrace condominiums, and I am opposed to the location of that porta potty also. It's been moved in directly in front of us, as the others have said. And the residents have had to call the police because of the drug handling. And I guess I would just like to say, I retired to this beautiful place, and now I have to live with that. And also, I'm sure that it's going to affect our, if we try to sell our condo, that's our view. I'm afraid that's not going to be great for any of us. So, and I am afraid. I'm afraid of the people that it's drawing in, and the gunshots that are going on out there. And so, anyway, that's my input. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Sandra Peck. I also live at the Riverside condos, River Park Terrace. For the last 12 years, I retired there. My second floor condo looks directly now at a orange, huge porta potty. And it was moved, which your information doesn't show because I read your information on the internet. It was moved from under the 7th Street Bridge, 150 feet maybe, to be right at the apex of our semicircle, so that every one of the 30 units, that is their viewpoint. Why it was moved, according to the Parks Department, is because when it was under the 7th Street, I guess there was a fire. I don't know, I heard all this secondhand. But there was vandalism, And so they moved it, so there was a camera to look at it. Well, if they need a camera to look at it, buy a camera and put it over there where they actually use it, I guess, where the tents are. I don't know. We just want it moved away from our big bay windows. And I must add, talking about how much money everybody's spending, property owners, what, between 25 and 3,000 per unit, times 30 per year, property taxes. Not to look at a big orange porta potty. Thank you.
Anyone else who wanted to speak on this?
Hi, my name is Jenny Stegmiller, and I represent 3 units at River Park Terrace, all on the 2nd story. All 3 units overlook the beautiful Riverside Park. I've owned there for 7 years. Now all of my units look over this beautiful porta potty. So I also listen to every workshop and every meeting of the Grants Pass City Council. I want to stay current in the progress of the council workshops and regarding housing, tourism, urban campground, really all the work that the city is progressing. I want to comment this evening regarding the homeless in the park and the idea their rights seem to take precedence over all other tax-paying citizens. I am fully aware of the injunction filed against the city, and I have read much of that injunction. What I fail to find in the litigation is the caveat allowing the transients to disregard all city ordinances and laws. It would seem with the incredible number of calls and responses requiring law enforcement intervention, daily drug dealing, and trash needles causing unsafe work environments for the city workers, and now actual shootings in Riverside Park, isn't it time for the city to go on offense and request the court end the transient camping order? It was the people who filed the order who requested all transients and homeless to be treated the same. So do they request the parks be restored to the citizens of Grants Pass. You should request the parks be restored to the city of Grants Pass. It makes no sense to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a DMO and tourism advertising to bring in tourisms to a town filled with homeless camping in the parks. The residents of River Park Terrace number 30 homes. You've heard that already. We experience theft and vandalism weekly in our parking garages. They break into our storage lockers. They try to break into our cars. Our residents have woken up to people sleeping in their cars. I've shared with you in the past that we've even had an attempted fire setting in the building. The tents distract from our home values when we try to sell or rent our buildings, our units. And now, as people have shared, that we witnessed the drug dealing. So anyways, thank you for listening, and we pray that you finally get this situation resolved sooner rather than later.
Thank you. Was there anyone else here to speak on this? All right. We'll close the public comment and turn it over to council for discussion. I'll note before we get started, this is the first that I've heard of the problem with the view from the River Park Terrace, and we did move the other one when some neighbors complained about it being in front of their front yard. So I think if council wanted to continue with the porta potties in the park, that's something that can be resolved fairly easily. Obviously doesn't completely solve your problem. Valerie.
Yeah, I was actually going to add, today I went on a bicycle ride because it was such a beautiful day, and that is the first thing that I saw is when I went down there and I saw the black car. And I saw the activities going up at that park, at that particular bathroom. And I get it. I was a little hesitant to ride my bicycle. I did go back to kind of try to make my presence known that, hey, something's going on here. I don't think it's appropriate. But I was afraid to confront the people at the time. But it was a black car, and they had a little red wagon, and they were sitting right by the porta potty up there. I also felt that when I looked at the other porta potty, it was up in a concealed, it was kind of off, and there was a definite distinction between the two. So I would adamantly say that that porta potty is not in a good place, and it should be on the other side of 6th Street, because that is where the tents are. And I will give total kudos to our police for what they are attempting to do. If you do read the police reports, you see they are going after people for trashing and littering, and because in the injunction it specifically says that any illegal thing they do, they can be cited for. So they have to be allowed to rest, but they cannot break the rules. So I give kudos to our police officers. I also went up to Tussing Park and talked to the neighbor that we've talked about there numerous times, and honestly, there was nobody at Tussing Park, and it did look cleaned up. And even Riverside Park had some, but I have a daughter who lives up in Westland and Portland, so I've been up there many times. And my daughter was down, and she said, I'd take my kids to Riverside Park any day over any other parks in Portland. So I know it's horrible, and I know we're in an injunction, and we really want to get out of it. But in the meantime, I am totally in favor of moving that particular restroom over to the other side of Riverside Park where the camping is. And I will say, we are kind of at the mercy of the court system. They did look at it, and December 7th, I think, was the date they actually looked at it, and we're sitting waiting for their response. And so we are just literally there. But I will say that our police department is doing a great job, and I did get kudos when I was out today talking to people about what our police have done to try to make it a better situation. So at this point in time, as much as I am going to say that we need to keep the 2 porta potties as long as we're under the injunction. I think it does help our parks employees. It is obviously, we have human needs and they need to be taken care of. It has done some positive things, but I'm also going to say that one needs to be moved, and we need to do what we can to move the injunction or get some notification of where they are with that, because especially as we move into the tourist season, I agree. I mean, I hope that we've kept track of all sorts of data so that when that, so we can use some ARPA funding to replace what we've done, and also so we can make the point that, our economy is based upon our parks. So that's what I have to say.
Joel, then Brian.
I had several things to say. First off, there's people that are homeless. And then there's people that are criminals. And then there's people that are, for whatever reason, trapped in substance abuse or mentally ill. And that goes across all economic strata. They've done studies what attracts criminals. So if graffiti's on the wall and nobody takes it down, so if a car has a broken window, it is going to be vandalized quickly over a car that's in the same neighborhood that does not have a broken window. And so what we have here is a situation that attracts criminals. It's not necessarily the homeless that are doing the criminal activity, but the criminal activity is there. So I think a couple of the things we need to do is, first off with graffiti, wherever we see graffiti, we need to immediately take care of it. Downtown, other places, because that is a sign of neglect that attracts that element to our community. The other thing that's a little more difficult, having been raised in a park similar to what Valerie just described in Portland, parks can cease to be public places because people are afraid. And the crime rate will actually go down because nobody will go there, which is kind of interesting. We kind of have a perfect storm where we have the decriminalization of heroin and meth. We're 49 out of 50 states in treating substance abuse. We have organized crime at high level, and the poor chief over here has to deal with all this stuff. And to be frank with you, it's going to get worse before it gets better. We need to get together as a community, and I'll talk more about that later on under comments. But let's move the toilet in the meantime.
Brian?
So I agree with everything Valerie said. And just to keep things moving along, I'm going to make a motion to extend the porta potties for another 60 days and to move that porta potty to the west side of 6th Street, wherever staff deems most appropriate.
Is there a second? Valerie, thanks. Discussion on the motion? Joel?
So I'm going to be voting yes due to the impact on the park employees. They deserve that.
Vanessa?
Yeah, I also wanted to address all of the community members coming tonight. Thank you for sharing your testimonials. I'm sure you guys are all well aware we are bound by a federal court injunction. We are required to allow these individuals to rest in the parks. That is completely out of our control. We have no say over that. We're currently in an appeals process with that right now, so there's not an update on that. Prior to the decision in August of 2021 to place the porta potties in the park, people were using the restroom outside of a restroom, and it was causing a huge problem for our parks employees. That's where the decision came in to provide relief for them in their daily work. So that's really the spirit of this allowance, and I think it is a fair compromise to move the porta potty outside of where it is now. This is the first time I've heard of that complaint, so thank you for making us aware.
Any further discussion? Okay, so Brian made a motion to extend the porta potties for 60 days and to move the one that's currently more centrally located to the west side of 6th Street. And Brian, how do you vote?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Valerie?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
DJ?
No.
Okay, motion passes 7-1. Thanks for coming and letting us know about your concerns, and hopefully we can continue to work on improving park cleanliness and safety and getting an urban campground set up to help move more homeless people to a better location for everyone. Thanks for your patience. We know you're in the thick of it there. All right. Next up, I think we have somebody who wants to do public comment. So let's do that first, and then we'll come back to our task force appointment. So at this time, this is an opportunity for the public to address the City Council on items not related to a public hearing or council action item that was before the council tonight. The intent is to provide information that is pertinent to the city's jurisdiction. Each speaker will be given 3 minutes to address the council as one body, not two individuals. At the conclusion of public comment, council will have an opportunity to respond. This meeting will proceed in an effective and courteous manner. Citizens and council members will be allowed to state their positions in an atmosphere free from slander, threats, or other personal attacks. Signs or placards, outbursts of applause, campaigning for public office, or other disruptive behavior will not be tolerated. If you have a question regarding any government-provided service or a current city policy, please contact the city manager's office in an attempt to resolve the matter. And with that said, we have 2 cards. So Jace Daggett.
Testing. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Boy, I sure picked a good night to make an unrelated comment. My name is Jace Daggett. I came tonight because I realized that it's very easy to make the time to come out and tell you when you're doing something wrong, But I realize that it's probably very infrequent when someone comes out to tell you that you're doing something right. So I've come out here this evening to say that I'm ultimately very pleased with the progress you've made with the urban campground. Councilor Delagrange knows firsthand how passionately I became involved starting back at the school board meeting in November. And you all may remember me from a previous public hearing and the round table you held. I wanted to say that I feel like I need to apologize because this was my first involvement in politics at any level, and I was oblivious to how much time it takes for a project to jump through the hoops of political bureaucracy. So it's kind of hard to believe that it's already been 5 months since the initial blowback. It was never my intent to derail this project, neither at all or this long. In fact, I personally support the mission of Rogue Retreat as a former homeless person myself, and have donated what I could spare to them. I guess in my mind, I was thinking it was possible for all parties involved to find a new location that wasn't next door to a school and get shelters built by Christmas. In hindsight, that was extremely naive. But ultimately, I'm glad about where we're at today, that you've taken the time to hear our concerns, and that you've allowed public involvement and transparency, and that it sounds like we're closer to finishing this project. The one thing I did want to emphasize, though, is the importance of transparency. My heart sank after the progress you made when everybody except for one dissenter voted to pull the contract discussion into executive session. And then I was equally relieved when you all decided to change your mind. If it had stayed in an executive session, I don't believe the public would know the parameters of the site's location, which is the entire reason we became involved in the first place. So I just wanted to close by requesting that you continue to challenge the need of pulling a discussion into executive session. Your lawyer has a legal obligation to protect you, so please understand that he will always recommend executive session. But he also told you that you have the right to waive attorney-client privilege, so please continue to consider exercising that right whenever it is reasonable to do so. There are some discussions where your protection is not necessary for certain topics as public representatives, and at the very least, I ask that you please consider keeping 90% of the conversation public and only utilizing executive session to close the discussion with confidential specifics. But ultimately, please know that I, as possibly the loudest critic of this project, am happy with the parameters you've set after restarting the urban campground, and I look forward to its completion. Thank you.
Thank you. Judy Ahrens.
Judy Ahrens, resident of Joseph County. Actually, the real reason I came tonight, and the only reason, I just got involved in your everything on the agenda, but my real reason for coming tonight was to do my second presentation. Because I was at Josephine County, the Commissioner's office this morning, and just to let you know, I brought this, it's a chocolate cake with Cool Whip and strawberries on top, and then I'll explain what it represents. A lot of Christians next week will be celebrating Holy Week, and I'm come from a background of many generations of Christians, and there's a lot of wonderful churches in this community, and so I just really fell in love with mine close in Riverside. Riverside. And so the reason I baked this cake and wanted to present it to you, I was pretty excited about it, is what it represents as a Christian as the next week comes before us. The chocolate here, I want you to know, represents sin. We have a lot of sin in the world. We have a lot of people that don't tell the truth. They get to power or whatever they do for a lot of reasons that are just. We don't have good family relations. There's a lot of divorces, a whole bunch of stuff going on. That's called sin. That's the chocolate part here, okay? So the next part I have up here are the strawberries. Let me tell you what the strawberries represent. And I'm going to insert here that my great friend on my prayer conference every morning at 6 o'clock, we pray for our senators, and she's from Virginia, and she's the one that has done this for her grandchildren every year. Donna Matz, I want to make sure I get her name in because I tell her I go far with this cake over the last 10 years, which she's shared with me. So the strawberries represent Christ dying on the cross. He walked this earth. He was sinless. He came down from God to be Jesus, to walk among us. And because of all our sins, he took it upon his shoulder, and was crucified in the most unbelievable way, and pierced and naked and shamed and everything for us. That's a neat thing. Because that's good, that's why they call it Good Friday coming up next Friday. It's Good Friday, it's good for us, for Christians and believers. Now, the Cool Whip represents redemption. So the Cool Whip means that as we are all continue to be sinners, the Cool Whip represents redemption. That means our sins have been washed away because of what the strawberries did, or Christ did. So what I'm doing tonight is just presenting this to you and hope you enjoy it. And my main reason for coming here tonight was just to present the cake. So I'm happy to.
Thanks, Judy. Yeah, you can set it down on the table over there. All right, council, did anyone want to respond to public comment tonight? Valerie?
I will just say thank you to Jace, because it is nice to get your input, and you're right, we don't always hear the positive and that sort of thing. So truly appreciate that, and appreciate anything that you have to add, and you're coming in to be involved with the council. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jace, as well. And it's always good to hear feedback after the storm, you know, passes, and it has been taking an awfully long time to get this urban campground going, and I am perhaps naively optimistic that we'll get a decision made before too much longer here, but that's the goal. I think we have it we're going to touch on it again on the 18th, I think we decided. So let's hear the emails, and then we will hop back to our task force.
There were 2 emails regarding Riverside Park shooting and safety in the park, and one titled Street Sweeping Posted Sign.
Thanks, Karen. Okay, Rick, let's get your motion.
I'd like to make a motion to extend tonight's session past 9 o'clock.
Thank you. Second from Val. All in favor of extending the session tonight?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Next up, motion appointing one member to the Sustainability Energy Action Taskforce. And is there any sort of presentation, or just going to?
No, there was no presentation. The 2 applicants, I believe, are included in your packet. The committee did meet yesterday and made a recommendation, which I believe is also on the dais. They felt that the application put forward by the selected candidate was much more complete, that they had a much more round experience level, and would be pleased to have them on the committee or the task force.
Yep. Thank you. So this is, there's one position for an RCC student specifically is what we're appointing for tonight, and there were 2 applications. We had Joshua Gabriel and Catherine.Water, and the other task force members voted to recommend Catherine.Water, as Jason stated, just that the application was more thorough.
I just had a clarifying question, and that was only because, I mean, you looked at the 2 of them, and I was the same way. I mean, either one of them would have been fine. But it is obviously a county-wide. It's not just a city committee, correct? And that was my clarification, because I just wanted to make sure that was the case. Thank you.
Yes, city residency was not a requirement for the position. So, counselors, if you would go ahead and circle your preferred candidate, pass it down to me. We can probably take care of this pretty quick. And DJ, if you want to text me yours, or say it out loud if that's easier. All right, do I have them all? Okay, we have 7 nods here for Catherine.Water. Those are coming from Vanessa, Brian, Rob, Kurt, DJ, Rick, Valerie, and 1 for Joshua Gabriel coming from Joel. Brian.
I move to appoint Catherine.Water to the Sustainability Energy Action Taskforce.
Thank you. Is there a second? Valerie, thank you. Any discussion on the motion? All right. Brian, you move to appoint Catherine. How do you vote?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Valerie?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
DJ?
Yep.
Thank you. Motion passes 8-0. All right. I think that brings us to the council president's moment to shine here in reading the consent agenda. And those are items of such routine nature without controversy that they may be approved with a single action. And I don't see that we have any starred items tonight, so Joel, take it away.
The consent agenda. A, resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract for the Saturday Artisan and Crafters Market lease. B, a resolution authorizing the city manager to purchase a replacement high-vac combination jetpack truck. C, resolution authorizing the city manager to execute agreements for water treatment plant chemicals. 2 chemicals, sodium hypochlorite and aluminum sulfate. E, resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a sole source agreement for water treatment plant chemicals of Chimera XL19. F, resolution terminating the declaration of a state of emergency in Grants Pass due to COVID-19. G, building upon the good work of the Public Art Committee, motion granting consent to the Committee on Public Art to propose a new beauty alley beautification project. H, second motion was from the same committee approving the advertisement of a call for artists for the Beaver parking lot. Motion acknowledging the receipt of the monthly and quarterly financial reports for the quarter ending December 2021. And then we have several minutes of meetings, approving the minutes of the City Council, the Historical Buildings and Site Commission, Housing Advisory Committee, Urban Tree Advisory Committee, Parks Advisory Committee, several there, Urban Area Planning Committee, or Commission, excuse me. There was 3 there. And then the last item on the consent calendar is authorizing the city manager to enter into an option agreement with Chrisman Development Incorporated for 1.89 acres on Southwest Ramsey Avenue for affordable housing. With that, I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Vanessa with the second. Thank you. No, question. Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to double check on item G, George. It does talk about the LB fund and it talks about general resources identified, but it doesn't say if that fund will continue to exist. I just wanted to make sure that it would continue to exist.
Has proposed funding for the fiscal year 23 budget, but ultimately it'll be the budget committee and city council to do the authorization of those funds, but it's planned to have funding in it.
My question stems from the land and buildings discussion that we had where that was
Yes.
had potential to be sunsetted. I just wanted to make sure it's not going to sunset.
No, it's got new funds in it projected in the budget.
Thank you.
Okay, is there a second on the motion? Vanessa, thank you. All right. Joel, do you consent to the consent agenda?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Valerie?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
DJ?
Yeah.
Thank you. Next up, items from mayor and council. Council, do you have anything you wanted to discuss? Valerie?
Yes, I just wanted to mention that Jason Schneider, many of you have heard and got an email from him. He is the consultant that the Destination Marketing Organization is using for their strategic planning, and he is putting together a plan. He has spent 6 weeks total. I think he's got 10 days left in the city, and he is reaching out to many of our stakeholders to have discussions with them, to put together a strategic plan moving forward. And I know he said he had reached out to a number of counselors and hadn't heard back. So I'm going to encourage you to meet with him. I think it's a very positive thing. He, has, that we have a lot of decisions that are going to need to be made in the next, moving forward with the destination marketing organization regarding events and how we're going to move forward through this kind of gray zone that has been presented. So getting input to him, I think, is going to be really important from all of the council. So you should be able to just email him back, and on the email that he gave to you, and if you didn't get one, let me know. I can send a link. He has a schedule that you just need to put in some scheduled times. He has an pretty open schedule, so.
Thanks for the reminder. I'm one of those who needs to get back to him. Joel.
So I'm following up on the consensus workshop for solving homelessness in Grants Pass. I've been working with Doug Walker and some of the nonprofits, and we got the 2-day workshop scheduled for the last week in May. I lied to you before. That first session is going to cost about $2,000. I've been going out to the community to collect money from different nonprofits and different folks in the community that are interested. As you saw, the energy in the room today. A lot of people are interested. A lot of people are excited by it. I think it'll be a good stroke for our city to build cohesion. The intent of the workshop is to not bypass anybody. It's to bring people of diverse views together. Our facilitator is been recognized by a national contracting firm as a senior level conflict resolution specialist and facilitator. So we'll have some professional resources there. I know several of you have expressed interest in coming. If you want to come, let me know. Aaron, I would assume that we can have more than 3 counselors, and it doesn't constitute a breach of our.
Yeah, it'd be treated similar to like a League of Oregon Cities training.
Okay, okay, that would be good. And we also are going to have some representatives from the homeless community as well. So we look forward to it. If you want more information about it, come see me. Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else? Val?
Well, I just wanted to add to that, because I do think it's something that as we reach out and try to bring in as many different sponsorships, because I think it's important, but I would like to see the city consider making a contribution of a sponsorship as well, because I think if we're coming out and asking other people to come to the plate with a sponsorship, that some sort of minimal sponsorship from us as would be recommended as well. So,
and what I'm working with the people that I've been soliciting funds from is like $200 to $300 a piece. So it's not a lot of money, but I think the benefits are going to be significant. It's a good investment. It's not an expense.
Other comments from council tonight? Nope. Okay. Staff? Oh, Vanessa.
This is a request to Councilor Lovelace. I understand you do have a close involvement with the Ramsey Avenue, Nebraska development, and I would ask in the future that you recuse yourself from any votes on that matter because of that.
I guess I just didn't realize it wasn't on the first agenda, so it was only on the agenda today, so I'm sorry if I did. I kind of skipped, because I do know that I need to recuse myself, so thank you for that reminder.
Yeah, we added that one to the consent late, so. Okay, staff, items from staff?
I have one real quick one. We enrolled in a program today that we got our first customer. It is a statewide program of low-income household water assistance that's being administered through UCAN. So that'll be in addition to the funds that you allocate within our operating budgets to help out low-income folks with their water bills. The state of Oregon received over almost $14 million for ratepayer assistance. A lot of which is coming to Southern Oregon. And so that program is completely outside of the city's jurisdiction. It's being handled, like I said, through UCAN. They will pay the city directly. The customer is only responsible for transportation and the franchise fees. It's a really great program.
Question, how do they access it?
They go directly to UCAN. Our customer service people will also be reviewing folks to there. UCAN reviews their eligibility, and if they are eligible, they write a check to the city on their behalf.
Great. Anything further tonight? Rob?
So if the council wanted to sponsor the consensus workshop, what step would we have to take to make that happen?
You can just make a motion and that would affirm your sponsorship, and if you want to do a sponsorship level associated with that also, that'd be fine. You do have funds in the mayor council budget to accommodate such a request.
So do we want to vote on that tonight, or do we want to vote on that Monday, or what do we want to do with that?
Well, I would just as soon do it tonight, and I will make a motion to do that. I would say $500 would be, I feel, a good starting point, because I would like to have other people come to the plate as well. So I will make a motion that we give $500 to the workshop on conflict resolution coming forward on, I think it's May 25th and 26th.
Second.
All right, discussion on the motion. Vanessa?
I don't think I know enough about the workshop to vote this evening, so I will be voting no because I don't know enough. I don't know who is involved, who is invited, where it's held, any exclusions. I understand it's on the topic of the unhoused community, but that's really all that I know.
So I can share those details with you. We got a list of potential participants, and if you want to include somebody else, it's open. The other thing is the book that I lent to you on consensus building covers the whole process of what the facilitator covers. In fact, it was written by, he has since died, but written by a facilitator who has been very successful across the nation in facilitating a lot of social issues. A lot of social issues. A good example was public schools in Detroit and funding issues when the industry shut down. Another one would be Bonneville Power Generation with the native tribes and fish runs and environmentalists. There's just been, he's worked overseas and he does a very good job. So, and he has a lot of integrity too. But anyway, it's that book that I shared with you.
Vanessa?
What is the desired outcome of the workshop?
The desired outcome of the workshop is to develop a community cohesion where we support each other, we embrace each other and our differences, and we move forward together. And we don't alienate each other. We have that social cohesion where the community can solve its own problems. So, for example, as the other thing I thought about talking about tonight was talking to the churches. Several of the churches have stepped up their plate with homelessness, but they need to. And so I would ask you, if you're listening to this, and that you step that up, because your education in financing and preventing homelessness and those kind of things, and that it goes on beyond any single denomination or any single nonprofit. And together, when nonprofits work together, they're even more powerful and effective. So, for example, if I could be as bold as to say the Rogue Retreat and no, what's that? And the Gospel Rescue Mission. They're both Christian organizations, and I don't know if they've even talked to each other. The other thing that happens in a lot of these, we're not alone, is people tend to lob bombs toward each other rather than hands. And trying to get out of that mode of lobbing bombs toward somebody in our community that may or may not be viewed as supporting my position. And sitting down and actually having a reasonable conversation with them, which is very powerful.
Vanessa?
Last question, is it open to the public?
Unfortunately, it is not. It is it's a facilitated circle. We've had them open to the, if you want it open to the public, it's going to cost a lot more money. So we're talking about, and we talked about this being kind of a test if we wanted to use it in the future. So we're trying to keep expenses down, but we're talking probably at the most 30 to 40 people. But if you have somebody that really wants to participate, like some of those folks in the audience tonight, it's been my experience that the people that have the most passion have the most energy to give. And so if somebody's really passionate and they're not at the workshop, they probably need to be. So.
Joel, is there an organization that is sponsoring it or organizing it? Like, if we were to write a check, who would we write it to, I guess is my question.
So the facilitator used to be a Forest Service supervisor, actually here in Grants Pass in Medford. And Bob Chadwick Associates, who wrote the book that Vanessa and I think Rob's seen it and Valerie's seen it. If you're interested in the book, I don't know if I gave it to you, Brian, or not. But I got 3 copies of it at home. If you want to look up on the web, Chadwick Associates, that'll give you the flavor of what the workshops are like.
Oh, but as far as like an organizer, is Chadwick the organizer?
Mike Lund is going to be doing the organizing. Bob has died. So Mike Lund, who worked with Bob, is going to be the facilitator, and it's going to, what he does is build capacity within the community. So we're going to take 2 people here, and he's going to train them how to do this as we do it. And then as we move forward, if we want to do it in other issues, we'll have that capacity.
So I think, Mayor, to also answer your question, if we're going to be a sponsor of the event, then we can, and one of the major sponsors, we can draft a small contract or use a contract that they've used. And so there'd be something there because we need to have that paper trail. And so does that answer your question potentially? I guess we may take the lead on having that document so we can adhere our sponsorship to that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my question is, yeah, kind of who is contracting with this facilitator, if we were to, are we becoming the organizer, or are we making a grant to some other organization that's organizing this event? I'm not clear.
So I've been laying the groundwork, working with the facilitator to organize the event free of charge. And we're well along the way. What we did was, to start off with, we had a diverse group of people identify who they thought should come. And worked with Sam from Allcare and Doug, and let's see, there was a reverend from one of the local churches, and Valerie, just to get started. And then I've been working with the facilitator one-on-one. He'll bring the resources over for the 2-day workshop, and he'll run it.
Okay. Any other questions, Rick?
So Joel, would that time include on the table funding for public safety and the sheriff, and how to proceed with that?
So you have to take one topic at a time, and you don't want to diffuse. What you want to do is take your highest energy topic, because you can have a low energy topic and have a workshop and there's not a whole lot of energy around it. So you take your issue that has the most disagreement, and then you try to build a consensus around that to build community cohesion. So if we wanted to do a second one associated like they did in Detroit with school funding, or like they did in Eugene with the police force, or this group has worked with a lot of different conflicts in the public arena, then we would have the capacity to do that in a separate workshop with our own facilitators.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, we had a motion to sponsor at $500 a workshop on conflict resolution. The funds would be coming out of a council discretionary fund. Okay, any further discussion? Let's see, Valerie made the motion, so Valerie, how do you vote?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Joel?
Is this a conflict of interest? Yeah, yes. I'm not getting any of the money, I guess.
Yes. Vanessa?
It's not open to the public, no.
Brian?
No.
DJ?
Yep.
And I think I skipped Rick.
Yes.
All right. Motion passes 6-2. Anything further this evening?
I move that we adjourn.
All right, is there a second? A second from Vanessa. All in favor of adjourning this evening?
Aye. Yes.
Any opposed? All right, we'll see you back on Monday. There.